on my clock right here, and we're going to go by my clock. So if you want to, we can mute you. If you don't want to be muted, just be quiet. This is really challenging for me. I Zoom with some other county agents on a weekly basis, and there's 3 others. I can't keep my eyes looking straight. I'm all over. So you're going to have to bear with me on some of this new technology. It's new to me, but first off, I would like to say thanks for everybody for participating in this event. This is kind of a, well, not kind of, this is a whole new endeavor for any life member meeting that there's ever been. And we're going to try to do things and accomplish things that might not be according to the policy book, but hopefully we won't do anything that'll make anybody mad, and we'll get over COVID-19, 20 and 21 and get to next year as we can. But I have to admit, I was president of NACAA in 2013. That was the Galaxy meeting, if you may recall. And I thought there were challenges for the NACAA board at the Galaxy meeting. Some of you lived with those challenges, Chuck especially. But I think last year's board and this year's board have kind of exceeded those expectations. And my hat's off to everybody for getting things accomplished. And I'm very proud of what you did accomplish personally. Highlight a couple of the life members on the committee. The vice chairs is Herb Reed. Herb's on here somewhere if I keep looking around. Wave your hand, Herb. Thank you. Susan Kerr, she's waving her hand too if you look right there. And Stephen Monk, I see you're on there twice, Steve, looking around, but wave your hand over there, Steve. On mine, you're on the left-hand side. Can you hear us, Steve? Steve?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're there.
So
twice. Okay.
Well, the reason I'm on there twice because it seems my system works better to use one computer for sound and the other for video. So.
Man, oh man, you live it high up there in South Dakota. I only get one computer. So we're a couple other thoughts that I would like to. We wouldn't have this without those folks that were serving for the AMPIC meeting from the Northeast region. And Madeline Flavin DiNardo is here today. Madeline has been chairing that committee and for the AMPIC meeting, and I'll turn it over to her and let her make a couple introductions, perhaps.
Okay, hey, thanks, Paul. So on behalf of the Life Member and Spouses Committee, welcome to the virtual Northeast. We've always enjoyed your hospitality as we travel through our beautiful country. And we're glad that today we can give you a little taste of Northeast contributions to American culture. So I'd like to introduce our committee. Gene Sherman, who's a life member, and he's retired from Penn State Cooperative Extension in Indiana County. And Gene was able to line up our speakers for this afternoon. And Paul Craig, as you know, is our National Life Committee Chair. And Paul got us our Pennsylvania Dutch speaker for today. Our co-chair is Tom Gallagher. And Tom is semi-retired with Cornell Cooperative Extension up in Albany County, New York. And as Paul mentioned, I'm Madeline Flahive DiNardo, and I'm the county agent with Rutgers Cooperative Extension in Union County, New Jersey. And the committee would really like to thank Scott Hallbaker for making this Zoom meeting possible. And also a big shout out to Gregory Martin, county agent with Penn State Cooperative Extension. And Gregory is your person to reach out to if you're having any technical problems with our Zoom meeting today. And I'd also like to give a thanks to Greg Straight with Penn State Cooperative Extension. Greg was the transportation chair for the MPAC meeting. And early on, we worked really closely with Greg with lining up bus tours and stuff like that. So we really appreciate all the time he spent working with us on that. So welcome to the virtual Northeast, and we're really glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Madeline. I was invited to participate with that team that was there somewhat midway through their planning sessions, and that group went from, how many buses do you think we're going to need, and do you have a contact down at the Liberty Bell, and what are we going to do for here, and all of a sudden COVID appeared and everything shifted, and the idea was proposed to do something like this. They wanted to meet, they wanted to see the life members have that opportunity, and I thank them for everything that they did. It really was an interesting experience. I also would like to finalize my thank yous. That's tradition to give thanks, but I'll give a shout out to Dave Phillips. He's on there somewhere listening in on a phone in the midst of Montana. Dave was the past chairperson of this committee, and he was chairman last year and transitioned to me, and he was giving me an awful lot of good advice throughout the year, phone call away, and I greatly appreciate it. And of course, Scott Hallbaker, who doesn't appreciate what he's done. So I'm going to turn it over right now to President Williams and see if he can update the life members a little bit on what's going on with NACAA at this time. Craig?
Thank you, past President Paul Craig. And it was my honor to serve as your campaign chairman for your election way back when we were rolling into Galaxy, before Galaxy. And you are right, we had a lot of fun at that time. And boy, Gene McAvoy and I, we're having a tremendous amount of fun along with Scott right now at this time. Not only do we roll into NACA early this year and deal with COVID and decide what we're going to do and buy our way out of Philly. I remember an early conversation where Paul Craig called me and said, the life members are really worried about having too many people on a bus. Do you think we could order twice as many buses? And I was about to say, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Soon after that, I told Paul, it doesn't look like we're going to do any tours anyhow, while the life members were trying to order twice as many buses. We have rolled into this week. Things are going really well. We have over 800 people signed up for the MPIC. Not to mention, if we didn't have enough going on, some little rainstorm called Elsa has shown up in Florida. And that is right now over the top of the University of Florida, which is where we have our entire Microsoft Teams account housed, and is going on at their campus, which is presently this morning closed for two tornadoes. So just like airplane delays and no hot water in the hotel, and somebody forgot to order the chicken for the banquet, we've got the same things going on for the virtual meeting. Scott and I have been monitoring channels all over our computers today. There is a shout out, the Ben Franklin welcome video and the state flags presentation. We have been putting those items up onto the website after they have been shown. So you'll be able to go to the NACAA website and see all the Hall of Fame DSA AA videos, along with our sponsor videos and with our opening Ben Franklin welcome videos. We do have a separate slide for national sponsors and Northeast sponsors. And in the change of the year, the sponsors, Northeast did an excellent job getting their sponsors, and we still have a robust program. And we did have a a youth video program that was done for the talent show. And so those videos will be up also. So a lot of the same things are happening. A lot of things are different. I'd like to turn over a little bit of time to past president, presently Gene McAvoy, for his comments, and welcome from Florida.
Thank you, President Williams, and thank you all, the Life members, for inviting me. It's good to see a lot of old friends out there. Sorry we couldn't meet in person, but we do have a great meeting planned for next year. We recently, with President-elect Bill Burdine, visited West Palm Beach to tour the facilities, and I think you'll be very pleased. The main hotel actually connects to the convention center, and the overflow hotel is a block and a half away. So there's going to be a lot of walking around there. There's a lot to do in that area. There's a lot of restaurants, nightlife, things, art museums, and things to do within a few blocks of the convention center. And they have electric vehicles that you can download an app, and you'll be able to call an electric car to come and pick you up and take you wherever you want to go in the downtown area. It's well connected. You can get by train to Orlando. West Palm Beach Airport is a very nice little airport. It's, you know, not like flying into New York City or some of the big airports where you got 16 terminals and you've got to run across the entire airport to get to your flight. So it's kind of nice. Everything's compact. I think you'll enjoy it. Look forward to seeing you there. Also, I would just add, I'm in charge of the Life Members Committee for next year. And we've got a lot of things. We'll be taking you to airboating, fishing trips. I can show you what we have planned. Beaches are nearby. You have the Intercoastal Waterway, where we'll be taking you on boat rides. So there's a lot to do there, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, President Williams. I would at this time take the opportunity, and again, I apologize. There is a chat box. If you, well, when I scroll to the bottom part of the screen I'm looking at, I can see the word chat. And Madeline's agreed to kind of keep an eye on that yellow light that comes on. And if somebody has a chat or a question or something, there is an opportunity to do that. Probably the simplest is to start in the chat, and then maybe we'll just unmute your mic and we'll let you kind of ask the question if you have to. So anybody have a question or anything for the past or the present presidents? Gene? Okay. I keep hearing a buzz on my computer. I don't know if that's me or whatever it is. Everybody's muted, but okay. Well, I appreciate Gene, Craig taking the time to join us. You're welcome to stay along if you like, but having served in that position previously, I know even on a virtual conference, you're probably virtually busy. So I'll leave it at that.
That's no problem. We still have people stuck in the opening session conference room, and they want to know where their presentation room is, and we've got to go tell them it's time to leave the session room. So they're hanging out in there, but they're in the wrong room. So yep, it's no problem. We love seeing all the Life members. You know, Carol and Gene Skurman I haven't seen for a long time, and we hope to see them again face to face with all of us here, even in Pennsylvania.
Definitely looking forward to it.
Thank you both. Enjoy the rest of the conference. All right, just an update for everybody else that's still on here. A couple things that I'd like to accomplish for the rest of the afternoon. I have a couple updates from the Life members. Some of the things that the committee is working on. We'll go through that. There is also the In Remembrance that we will be conducting. I hope to conclude that in the next 30 minutes. We have, thanks to Jean and Tom and Madeline, I think they've got a pretty interesting afternoon session here. They're going to be recorded and you can watch them again or share them maybe some point. But that we'd like to start as close to 2:45 as we can. And because of the virtualness here, we can kind of keep discussion to a minimum. And but I would welcome any input and suggestions that you do have. So use the chat, give us a heads up, and we can turn over the microphone and you can add something to our discussion here. I just wanted to update everybody on what is the status of the Life members in our association. My latest communication from Scott is telling me that there's somewhere just shy of 2,500 folks on the list as Life members. Unfortunately, and I think everybody's opinion, that probably 25 to 30% of those addresses, phone numbers are probably not the most accurate. We're talking situations where a man or a woman retired and they moved, or their email changed. Penn State, we get a Penn State email address and they keep reminding us it's only good for so long and you got to update and do that, but that's not the only university, I'm sure, that does that. And then of course there are passings. So that list hasn't been the focus of anybody really wanting to do anything with it. I'm talking with some of the Life member vice chairs. I think they would support the idea that, you know, maybe we need to focus on somehow reaching out to those addresses and seeing what's going on and doing that. So I think that was one of the tasks, if you wish, that they see a value for the committee. Now, that reaching out would also reflect on you as an individual from Minnesota or New York or Montana or New Jersey, and reaching out to the leadership of those states and encouraging them to keep up with the tradition of communicating with the Life members and making sure that they're included. And it's hard to do. In Pennsylvania, there are quite a few counties in Pennsylvania anymore that don't even have an ag agent working in the county. And what happens is if there is, it's one. Where at one time there was 3 or 4 agents, there's now one. And nobody knows, nobody communicates, nobody sends up to Penn State that Roland Freund passed away, you know, and if they get the information at the university, they will share it, but in times that doesn't happen. So any encouragement that you as a Life member could encourage to your states and to your state associations, I think that would be very valuable, and I would encourage you to do that. Another item that was mentioned to me, and I discussed this with Scott. I did not really discuss it with any of the committee, but most of you are aware that to be a Life member, the state that you retire, that you have to pay your dues for your last year. Then when you retire, your state needs to pay a $50 fee. Now, I'm not sure, I've never heard the reason why that $50 was added there, except for the possibility it would help to cover mailing costs. That would be, when I first think about that, that's about the only reason I could assume that they would want any extra fee. So that's a thought that I had, and well, again, somebody reminded me, do we really need that $50? And, you know, what's your thought on that? So again, I'll just put that down there, and we can discuss that maybe at another time, or what we have to do, but that's part of my thought as a member of this committee. If you recall, this past year, there was a survey sent out about an AMPIC, or maybe it was after the end of last year's AMPIC. And in there, which was sent to all the membership, and they've, President-elect Burdine from Mississippi has summarized those notes. You can find them on the web, I'm sure. But it's interesting what newer agents have as an attitude about an AMPIC. And the old adage of, if you ask for their opinions and you don't listen to what those opinions are, you're not really serving any value of asking for their opinion. And I would encourage you to check it out and hear and see what some of the voices are saying. One of the suggestions that was put in there was maybe to reevaluate life member activities at an AMPIC. And it was noted that perhaps, and again, I'm just throwing this out there, maybe to have like a 2-day, I was going to say old timers, sorry, life members session at the AMPIC, and it would highlight, maybe the way it was briefly described to me was come in on the night before, then the first day is the life member business meeting, maybe a program, and then you've got the annual banquet. And then the next day you have the conference tours. Everybody goes on a conference tour. You stay another night and you go home, or you go somewhere else in Oklahoma or wherever the meeting is, you know, but you don't stick around necessarily for the annual meeting in the role of a life member. So that was just a thought. So again, send me a line, send a note to one of the other vice chairs if you have an opinion on that. But I would encourage you to do that. All right. I did want to pass one other thought along about that. I think understand that the NACAA board is pretty receptive to what the life members would ask, I believe. Earlier this year, the Life Members Committee asked about support from NACAA to conduct a Zoom meeting for this session for the life members, and they were all over it. That was great. Told Scott, you know, yes, support us. We, you know, I couldn't do without him. And then it was suggested that maybe perhaps the life members wouldn't have to pay a full registration fee to participate in that team session that's going on. And the board came up with it. They asked, well, what do you think? And suggested a couple values of what to charge, and they were on that as well. So I think it's important that you understand that, you know, the NACAA board is there to help. And so give that some thought. Right now, if you're aware, the contracts and the room promises and everything are it's too late in the planning session to make such a big change for the life members at this time for West Palm Beach, but who knows what can all happen, but we'll welcome your suggestions. And since we're not sitting around sharing an adult beverage somewhere, discussions on some of these ideas are a little tougher, at least for me. So send me a thought. Okay. Finally, I'll update everybody on the leadership of this committee. Understand that the leadership on this committee begins and ends during an AMPIC. So right now, Herb Reed from Maryland is serving as the Northeast Vice Chair. This is his second year. A term of Vice Chair is 2 years. Herb will conclude that term at the end of this AMPIC. Okay. Herb is joined on a 2-year term by James DeVilliers from Louisiana. James also is going off on the committee at the end of this meeting, and James was unable to participate today, but has been there throughout the whole time, helping me when I need it. Herb is going to be replaced by Glenn Rogers. Glenn will start serving on the committee. Glenn is from Vermont. Glenn will start on the committee at the conclusion of this meeting this week. And in the South, Dirk Webb, Dirk's on the camera there, from Oklahoma. Dirk served on the board when I was on the board as a director, and Dirk is coming on next on the committee from the South. Presently on the West is Susan Kerr. Susan is moving. She started her term last year, and it will continue until the next year's meeting, the conclusion. However, Susan is moving, and she's not going to be able to in that position. And Janet Schmidt from Washington has volunteered, stepped up. Susan or Janet will be joining us there, and that will be the West region. And then Steve Monk is over in South Dakota, and Steve, he will serve also until the end of next year's meeting. And I, as chairperson, I will be on the committee as national chair until the end of next year. And then John Campbell is from Tennessee. John has stepped up to the plate, and John will be serving as the national chair next year at West Palm Beach. And greatly appreciate everybody agreeing. And we're not looking for somebody from the from the North Central region to take Steve's place. If you know anybody, if anybody's listening and they're interested, gosh, we'd sure welcome you coming on board. So, all right. I will now, one of the traditions of this committee that's been going on as long as I've been a part of it, I think it's been going on forever, is the In Remembrance. In Remembrance is a publication that was created every year. The vice chairs contact the states, and they obtain a listing of all the life members who have passed in the last year, and they're recognized at this time. So I will turn it over to Susan, and I will unmute Susan, and we can start in the West if you're on, Susan.
Yes, I am. And I have no video because bandwidth issues. It's just audio or video, and you get audio. The responses we got included, and I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations of names. Terry Mickle from Arizona. Muralida from Montana. Gail Gingrich from Oregon. Scott McKendrick and Wade Bittner from Utah. And those are the losses from the Western region since the last AMPIC.
Thank you, Susan. Steve, Monk?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And Paul asked me to read the names and the individuals from the southern region on behalf of James, which I'm honored to do here. So starting with Alabama, Clayton Homez, he was a county coordinator, passed away October 7th, 2020 from Blount County. Max Scott, he was agricultural agent, Geneva, Ogataga, Monroe counties, and passed away October 16th. Dan Mims, county agent, passed away November 25th, 2020. Arkansas, Earlton Sanders, he is staff chair from Garland County, passed away December 11th in 2020. Brent Griffin, he was the staff chair, Prairie County, January 10th, 2021. He passed away. Larry Pittman, area livestock specialist, passed away February 8th, 2021. Florida, Bert J. Harris Jr., agricultural extension agent, Highlands County, passed away May 19th. Robert Whitty, county extension director in Martin County, passed away June 22nd, 2019. Jesse Bold, county extension director in Clay County, passed away July 31st, 2019. John C. Russell, extension agent, professor, Gadsden County, passed away August 2nd, 2020. William L. Brown, county extension director, Alachua County, April 17th, 2021. For Georgia, Jerry William East, he was with the state staff in computer sciences, passed away December 2nd, 2020. Mark Andrew Shirley, county extension coordinator, Jackson County, passed away December 23rd, 2020. Maxie Pearl Nolan Jr. was an extension entomologist with the staff. January 14th, 2021, he passed. Michael Ray Wellborn, county extension coordinator, Newton County, passed February 4th, 2021. J. Frank McGill, extension agronomist with the staff, March 4th, 2021. Kentucky had no report that was submitted. Louisiana, Galton P. Landry, county agent, parish chair, LaFontaine Parish, July 7th, 2020. Dr. Leland Scroggins, district agent, Northwest District, passed away August 7th. Huey P. Roberts, commonly referred to as Sleepy, county agent, parish chair, Union Parish, passed away September 17th. Dr. Reed Lesensi, weed control specialist, passed away December 7th, 2020. G. Chester Johnson, referred to as Chet, was the area agent, Orleans area, passed away December 9th. Dr. Charles A. Miller, district agent, Southwest District, passed away January 20th, 2021. He was in the Southwest District. James W. Abadati, commonly referred to as Zeke, was a county agent, parish chair in Alberia Parish, March 5th, 2021. Billy C. Smith was the county agent in Rapides Parish, April 7th, 2021 is when he passed. Mississippi, Don Skelton, county agent, passed February 10th, 2020. He was in Grenada County. Dalton Guy Gardner, county agent, Prentiss County, passed August 26th, 2020. North Carolina, Earl H. Smith, agricultural extension agent, Henderson County, passed January 4th. Jack E. Early, county chairman, Cherokee and Clay County, passed January 26, 2020. Harry W. Myers Jr., extension agent, Iredell County, passed February 7th, 2020. William S. Lamb, county extension director, Wayne and Lenore counties, passed May 5th, 2020. Dr. Carl D. Hodges Jr., county extension director, Durham County, passed August 27th, 2020. Robert W. Swain, livestock agent in Columbus and Doplin counties, passed September 16th, 2020. Kenneth T. Patterson, county extension director, Alexander County, passed October 7th, 2020. Madison Dennis Sr., many times referred to as Keith, county extension director, Bladlin County, October 22nd, 2020 is when he passed. William G. Simons, referred to as just WG, area swine agent, Wayne County, passed December 12th, 2020. South Carolina had no losses reported or deaths from their state. Oklahoma, Raymond F. Ridlin, extension educator, Oklahoma County, passed June 2nd, 2019. Robert Kennedy, agent at large in the Northeast District, passed June 21st, 2019. Joseph Jeffrey, county extension director, Latimer County, passed November 19th, 2019. G.F. Parsons Jr., extension agent, McCurtain County, passed April 10th, 2020. Gordon Johnson, Regents Professor, Plant and Soil Sciences, passed June 21st, 2020. Dr. Robert Westerman, Department Head, Plant Science and Soil Sciences, passed September 8th, 2020. R.A. DeVore, County Extension Director, Ellis County, September 24th, 2020 is when he passed. W. Grant Praetor, County Extension Director, Atacota County, passed October 22nd, 2020. Leroy Waugh, County Extension Director in Harper County, passed January 17th, 2021. Tennessee, Bob Siegler, he was a county agent in Monroe County, and he passed March 21st, 2021. Texas, Todd W. Berry, Ag and Natural Resource and Extension Service in Van Zant County, June 13th, 2020 was his passing. John W. Allen, Extension and Ag and Natural Resources, passed July 24th, 2020. He was in Val Verde County. Eddie E. Harrelson, Extension and Ag and Natural Resources in Guadalupe County, passed November 6th, 2020. Robert Cooper in Harris County, Extension and Ag and Natural Resources, passed January 18th, 2021. P. Johnny Cooper, Extension and Ag and Natural Resources in Fort Bend County, passed January 19th, 2021. Buddy Logsdan, Extension and Ag and Natural Resources in Hall County, passed April 9th, 2021. Alan Turner, Extension and Ag and Natural Resources, was in Runels County, passed April 26, 2021. Larry Richardson, often referred to as Don, Extension and Ag and Natural Resources in Howard County, passed May 23rd, 2021. Virginia, Dr. Clinton Turner, Administrator, passed May 15th, 2020. Dennis Hartman, Dairy Science Specialist, passed June 4th, 2020. Bobby Cogsdale, Agricultural Natural Resources Agent in Northumberland County, passed July 6th, 2020. Carlos Allen Hunter, Ag and Natural Resources Agent in Campbell County, passed October 25th, 2020. Bill Van Dresser, Extension Veterinarian and Director, passed November 22nd, 2020. Carter Fleming, Ag and Natural Resources 4-H Agent in Craig County, passed January 5th, 2021. Carl Larson, Extension Veterinarian, passed January 24th, 2021. Dale Oliver, Ag and Natural Resource Agent in Ronconi County, passed February 2nd, 2021. Esley Smith, Ag Engineering Specialist, passed February 2nd, 2021. Carlos Cora, Ag Economist Specialist, passed February 13th, 2021. R. Keith Painter, Program Leader, passed April 28th, 2021. And that's the southern region.
Steve, do you want to just continue with the North Central?
I sure can, Paul. Yes. Illinois. C. Chris Dahl, Area Horticultural Specialist, passed October 12th, 2020. Charles Leeper, referred to many times as Ike, Montgomery County Agriculture Educator, March 22nd, 2021 is when he passed. Harry Wright, Pine County Agriculture, passed March 26, 2021. Indiana reported no deaths this past year. Iowa, John Cresswell, Extension Crop Field Specialist, passed October 9th, 2021. Lyle Mackey, Extension Area Director, passed September 4th, 2020. Kansas, Dennis DeJotte, Douglas County Extension Director, passed May 8th, 2021. Robert Bosworth, referred to many times just as Bob, Franklin County Agricultural and a Director, passed January 31st, 2021. William many times referred to just Bill Eberl, Land Resources and Agronomy. July 22nd, 2020 was when he passed. Barry Flinchbaugh, Agricultural Economics, passed November 2nd, 2020. Harold A. Gosh, Reno County Extension Director, passed October 8th, 2020. Charles W. Smith, Townley County Director, passed September 16th, 2020. John Strickler, Extension Forester, passed February 23rd, 2020. Don Wiles, Ford County Director, passed July 28th, 2020. Michigan, George Atkinson was a dairy educator in Anier and Montcalm counties, passed December 9th, 2020. Fred Henningsen, St. Joseph County Director, passed December 8th, 2020. Reuben Kari, Agama County Director, passed away August 5th, 2020. Lawrence Stibbins, Ottawa County Director, passed September 12th, 2020. Minnesota, John Ackeny, Watawan County Agent, passed February 8th, 2021. Missouri, Thomas Brown, Associate Dean of Extension, passed December 27th, 2020. C.W. Browning, Agricultural Engineer, passed August 20th, 2020. Charles T. Gamble, Farmington County Livestock, December 21st, 2020 was his passing. John Garrett, Southeast Missouri Agronomy Specialist, passed October 28th, 2020. Nolan Hine, Ag Economics, passed May 26, 2021. George McCollum, Grundy County Farm Management, passed July 30th, 2020. Raymond, many times just referred to as Ray Steffens, Franklin County Agronomist, passed away October 7th, 2020. Nebraska, Robert Fritzton, Northeast District Director, passed April 22nd, 2021. Dennis Call, Seward County Extension Educator, passed August 12th, 2020. Warden Shires, Lancaster County Extension Educator, passed March 6, 2021. North Dakota reported no deaths in their state. Ohio reported no deaths in their state. South Dakota had John Kangas, Hawken County Extension Educator, and John passed November 18th, 2020. Wisconsin, Danny Robert Short, Dodge County Livestock Swine Specialist, passed November 17th, 2020. Gail L. Vanderberg, the University of Wisconsin Administrator Emeritus, passed November 16th, 2020. And that's all those that have passed for the North Central region.
Thank you, Steve. Herb?
Okay, from the Northeast, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, and New Hampshire had none to report. So we go to New Jersey. We've got Ray Samulis, Burlington County, February 21st, 2021. John Dumchat, Sussex County, March 22nd, 2021. And Richard Obel, Monmouth County, June 30th, 2021. So that just happened. And then from New York, we have Charles Whiteman, Cayuga County, November 5th, 2020. Ed Rukowski was a county agent. I don't have the county he served in. It was May 14th, 2021. And then from Pennsylvania, Les Firth from Mercer County, April 9th, 2020. Roland Fruand, Cumberland County, April, we must have a mistake there. That's the same day. But anyway, April 9th, 2020, I'll check on that and make sure it gets corrected if one of those is wrong. Norman Persky, Warren County, December 25th, 2020. John Creighton, Wayne County, January 22nd, 2021. Then from Vermont, Robert Townsend Jr., Community Rural Development Specialist, November 22nd, 2020. Larry Mayotte, Extension Maple Specialist, also known as Mr. Maple, March 18th, 2021. And we had none from West Virginia. So that completes the Northeast.
Great. Thank you all for that. That book, that publication will actually be linked to the website for the Life members. So if you missed anyone, if you wanted to do that, we can do that. So that about concludes our Life members session. I would just like to say one thing. If just being on here, golly, there's Mina Hawtow. Who would have thought I'd see Mina? But if just being one of the reasons I continued to go to NAMPIC was because of the members that I'd see. And if being on this Zoom session a little bit made me think about somebody else or see somebody I haven't seen for a while, and it makes me reach out, perhaps a call or an email, good for me. And if it gets anybody else here and you kind of feel the same way, I'd encourage you to reach out and touch somebody like that yourself. So again, thank you all for participating in that part. We do have some pretty interesting speakers lined up for the rest of the afternoon. I'm gonna, Jean, I'm gonna, if we could bypass the 15-minute video from the steak place and go right to your 3 o'clock presentation. And if people want to wait around, and Scott, maybe if you can, when we finish, we'll show that video, and that way we'll kind of keep going. So Jean, give me a thumbs up if that's good for you, and I'll turn this over.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Hopefully there she is. I see her now. Okay, folks, let's get started on our virtual tours. As Madeline said earlier, we'd like to welcome you to Pennsylvania, the host state, and the Northeast region for our NACAA Life Members virtual tour this afternoon. As Paul mentioned, our original plans way back in 2020 were to do a lot of things around the Philadelphia area, including visiting Independence Hall, the Constitution Center, the Museum of American Revolution, Longwood Gardens at Kennett Square, Winterthur Museum and Gardens in Wilmington, Delaware, the Battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey, and the Valley Forge National Historic Park. But of course, as all of you know, COVID-19 interrupted our live meeting plans. So we had to step back and punt and come up with some different ideas. So we have planned some excellent virtual alternatives for you this afternoon. We're still trying to concentrate on the rich history of the Philadelphia area and Southeast Pennsylvania. So this is what we have planned for you for the rest of the afternoon. As Paul said, if you have any questions for our presenters, please type them in the chat box and Madeline is going to monitor those questions for us. So as Paul said, we were going to start off with our cheesesteak presenter, but we're going to skip that for now. So we're going to go straight to downtown Philadelphia at 110 Market Street. And we're going to visit with the folks at Shane Confectionery, the oldest candy and chocolate maker in the United States. Guiding us this afternoon on this tour is going to be Laurel Burmeister, historian for Shane Confectionery. Because Shane Confectionery is a very small business, Laurel says that she has many, many duties within the company. An interesting side note before I turn it over to Laurel is that my wife and I, back I think in early March, were watching the History Channel one evening, and lo and behold, there was an excellent documentary on Shane Confectionery. So this gave me an excellent idea. I said I needed to pursue this as a possible program for us today. So I see Laurel has joined us, so I'm going to turn the program over to Laurel. It's all yours, Laurel. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm going to actually share my screen right now so you can see some photos, not just my silly face. Give me one sec, let's do this. Okay. So I think you all see this. Let me know if you don't. Great. So yeah, my name is Laurel. I've been with Shane Confectionery for about 6 years now. I do the historic programming here at Shane. I also do all the research for us. I also do the social media. So I'm sort of, I'm really immersed in the company. I love it here. Yeah, so Shane Confectionery, like you heard, we are America's oldest continuously operating confectionery. And our building was built and established as a confectionery back in 1863 and went through several owners until it transitioned to the brothers Ryan and Eric Burley in 2010. They basically embarked on a meticulous restoration of the building and business and restored it to its 1911 glory. So today I'm going to talk to you about sort of that longer history in Philadelphia, as well as a context of like candy in Philadelphia at that time. So okay. Our shop is actually in Old City, right at Front and Market, right next to the Delaware River. The river has been a large shipping port since Philly's founding, and Philly was and still is the greatest importer of cocoa on the East Coast of the United States. And between the 18th and early 20th centuries, dozens of Philadelphia sugar refineries basically sustained America's growing dependence on sugar. So with this busy port came busy shops and markets, all clustered in our Old City area, starting in the 1700s. So, oh my, I hear my cat yowling. Okay, nope, he'll be fine. Sorry, guys. You got a bunch of sugar refineries and the cocoa trade coming into the port, and that meant a huge number of confectionaries and ice cream parlors basically popping up in this area. And like I said, because of her relationship to sugar and chocolate, Billy became a confectionery mecca. Across the country, businesses used the Philadelphia name to basically sell their products. Confectionery trade cards that we have in our collection from like Boston, New York, and Charleston, they all advertise things like Philadelphia Candy Man or Philadelphia style bonbons or Philly ice cream. And that was basically to denote quality. Yeah, so it was that in 1863, Benjamin Herring opened here at 110 Market Street, selling dry and confectionery goods out of what was then sort of a no-frills storefront. Herring had basically been operating confectionery right next door at 112 Market Street since the 1850s, but basically needed more space to expand and went into 110. In 1865, Herring partnered with another local confectioner by the name of Daniel S. Dangler. And in the summer, when sales started to slow down, as they still do today in chocolate shops in the warmer months, Herring and Dangler actually turned to selling fireworks. So we have this advertisement here that says fireworks, fireworks, Herring and Dangler, wholesale dealers and confectioners, sundries. And you have a header up here on this envelope that basically says Daniel S. Dangler, fruits, nuts, and confectioner's supplies at 110 Market Street. Yeah, and there's Daniel Dangler in the upper left corner. So yeah, in 1899, William T. Westcott, a local chocolatier, takes over. And he too sold raw and confectionery goods to the confectionery trade, as well as finished candies. He began the transformation from a bare bones shop that Herring and Dangler had into a more glittering, attractive storefront. He installed stained glass windows and started filling his display windows with like clear toy candy and a lot of decor. This photo on the left is from 1907, and you can barely see that there are some things in the window right in the center there. You have William T. Westcott on the right-hand side there. And he actually advertised his shop as sort of an old-fashioned candy shop. And I think that's kind of funny, like in the 1890s and the early 1900s, he's trying to be like, we are old-fashioned, we are great, we're what you want. But yeah, he owned this shop until 1911, when Edward Shane took over. And Edward Shane basically completed the remodeling of the shop into what you see today when you walk into our confectionery. 1911 is the high point of our shop, and it's the year we harken back to in a lot of aspects of our business. The Shane family owned the business for 99 years, up until 2010, when Edward Shane's grandson, Barry, was thinking about getting out of the business and passed it along to brothers Ryan and Eric Burley, who owns the nearby Franklin Fountain. He saw it was doing well, and he says, if you can make ice cream work here, then you can make a confectionery work. So we kept his name to honor the 99 years their family basically kept this business alive. So that's why we are still Shane Confectionery. So when the Burleys did take over, they I'm just going to show you some pictures. This is a photo from the 1960s of Shane as it looked then. And then on the left in this photo is Barry, and then there's his father, Edward Jr., who is Edward's son. And they're making marshmallows in this photograph. And that's in our confectionery, that's in our kitchens that look like pretty much what they do today. It looks not very exciting, but it's happening. And that table there is still there, which I think is interesting. Yeah, so today we still use the kitchens for, we still use the historic kitchen for cooking confectionery centers and ice cream inclusions for the Franklin Fountain. And a lot of those pieces are actually from the Shane family. And most products we make have 19th century roots. The equipment dates back to the early 1900s, including our stoves, which you see on the left, and our cream beaters, which you see on the right, to make buttercream. Behind the stoves is actually our hand cranked elevator, which we think is the oldest in the city right now. We still use it to basically bring up like sugar and chocolate from the basement. I'm going to go back and show you a couple photos. That's the interior of our shop. This is what it would look like in 1911 and then what it looks like today. We're closed right now because of COVID. You can come up to the window and order things as you would, but coming inside is a bit tough. It's a very narrow building because, you know, it dates that time, and they were utilizing their space the best they could. Yeah, so all this ornate woodwork has been here. We have the original wood floors. Yeah, it's just a really beautiful shop. So yeah, since 2010, we've basically maintained our community connections with all the customers from all over the years, but we also changed our mission to include more local and ethically sourced ingredients. We even have an apiary on our roof for honey, and this is also why about 6 years ago we started our Chocolate Works program, which is the bean to bar chocolate arm of Shane Confectionery. On the left there, you see Kevin. He's our head chocolate maker, and he's giving a talk on how he makes chocolate. On the right is Eric, and he's holding up one of the some of the bees, some of our worker bees on our roof. Yeah. So we basically purchase cacao using a cacao broker called Uncommon Cacao. And Uncommon has basically created this network of small farms and co-ops in different regions all over the world, and they focus on supply transparency, premium prices, fair wages, and community building. And while the cost of our confections has increased because of this and our sort of dedication to using local ingredients and sort of ethical cocoa, we basically have the comfort knowing our confections aren't contributing to any human suffering. And we're supporting local farmers, and that's really paramount to everything we're doing. And that's what we're really proud of right now. So around 6 years ago, around the time we started the Chocolate Works program, I started a tour program, in part to tell our history, but also to educate our consumers about craft chocolate. And since then, I've hosted over like 45 workshops and programs and partner with a lot of local businesses and makers and institutions, whether it be like a cheese maker or, you know, even a potter who focused on like Mayan pottery. We did a chocolate event with him. He basically created a historic drinking vessel while we created a historic drinking chocolate. And talk about those histories with folks. So education is a big part of our mission in whatever partnerships we have, whether it be for just our vendors or anything like that. So we also align ourselves with sort of craft and heritage foodways by partnering with companies like Deer Creek Malt House, which is Pennsylvania's first malt house since Prohibition. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with them. Wild Fox Provisions, which is a local hemp farm where we get our CBD distillate, and New Liberty Distilling. We've made a cacao whiskey with them, which was really great. And we work with Origin Milk for our premium drinking chocolate. So that's really great. Yeah, trying to think. That's where we are today. I thought I'd open it up to any questions about Shane or things we've done historically. Yeah. Is anybody, I'm gonna stop the share because I think y'all are, okay, stop share. Hey, hello. Does anybody have any questions about what we do or?
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, you can If you hover your mouse along the bottom of your screen, the chat box will come up and you can type your question under where it says to everyone and just type your question and hit the enter button and we'll see it on screen here. Or if you prefer to unmute yourself, I think that would be fine too.
Yeah. I'm used to hosting these things and being like, you're first.
Uh, I guess my question would be related to like regionality of chocolates. So if I think about food, if I think about regions of the country, I always ask somebody what's a local food? Sauerkraut, scrapple, or something like that. Are chocolates, flavors, types of chocolates, candies, regional that you are aware of or anything like that?
Yeah, well, we're still making buttercreams. You saw that big machine that we had up in our kitchen. Buttercreams are basically originated in the Philadelphia region by the Wonderly Company, and they bridge the gap between a chocolate piece, which was considered extremely expensive at the turn of the century and turn of the 19th to 20th century, and a candy, which was less expensive. So what they did was create a confectionery-based piece with sugar, butter, and sort of any local flavorings, and dipped it in chocolate, and it became an affordable chocolate piece. And that was the Shane family's basically bread and butter for the most of the 20th century, right? And that's a very hyper-local sort of tradition that we've kept up here at Shane. Other things are Clear Toy candy. I might have mentioned them earlier. I'm not sure how familiar many of you are with Clear Toy. Does anybody want to raise their hand if they are familiar with Clear Toy candy? Okay, Debbie has. Okay. So Clear Toy is this, it's a hard candy that's molded in sort of hard candy molds that were made here in Philadelphia by a single company between the 1860s and the 1910s. And basically a little toy that you can play with and then eat. They were given out to children during the holidays, whether it be Christmas or Easter. They're just beautiful molded candies, and we still make them today. We're one of the few places that still make them. Yeah, that's two big, very obvious historical candies that we make. When it comes to chocolate, we do drinking chocolate that has historic roots. Like I said, we research what was used in sort of especially pre-colonial drinking chocolate. For example, local peppers and licorice, things like that. So we actually have a robust drinking chocolate program that explores that history too when we're actually open. But not at the moment though. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool. Anything else?
Laurel, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Well, we always hear about Hershey chocolate when here in Pennsylvania. So
Of course.
can you compare yourself? I know your world's probably different. You make high quality, whereas they mass produce. So
yeah, I mean, it's a different game altogether. So for example, at the turn of the century, I was telling you about William T. Westcott, one of our original owners. He decided to actually get out of the retail game. He went on to be a chocolate manufacturer on a large scale. He got a huge factory at 9th and Spring Garden, and started making chocolate from there. And it was just a totally different game, right? We don't have many family confectionaries anymore, small time family confectionaries anymore, and we just happen to be one of the last that are still doing it, basically supplying high quality chocolates and confections to a smaller market. And because we're smaller, we have the ability to basically care for our ingredients, not have to necessarily make a product that has to appeal to every single person. We make it as we think is, you know, appropriate. We try to do the best we can. And it's a shame that there aren't more small businesses like us when there used to be literally thousands in the old city area. So I think it's just it's a different business altogether. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, 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 yes. So one last question from me. You had a picture there of some Guernsey cows.
Oh
you're
yeah,
sourcing milk from.
yeah,
Who
yeah,
were those folks?
yeah. So that's Origin Milk.
Origin. Okay.
What?
What was that again?
Origin Milk.
Okay.
And they actually focus on heritage breeds specifically.
Okay.
And so we were visiting a small, basically an Amish farm out in, I think it's Lancaster. And he had, I think, 45 cows. And his cows provided the milk, the ATM milk, for our drinking chocolate. Really delicious. I've never had milk like that before. So good. It's pasture-raised. They're pasture-raised cows. It's just connecting with your farmers and your local community is just so much. It's just a lot of fun. I've met so many great people and so many great makers over the years, like being at Chain. Yeah.
Who are your typical customers? Do you get a lot of tourists being in that part of Philadelphia?
Surprisingly, I would say, I mean, our business does die down in the summer like it did for our predecessors. We haven't started selling fireworks, but we do sell a lot more like candy-based things in the summertime during the tourist season. So confectionery is sugar-based sweets, and chocolate making is chocolate-based. So we sell more confections during the summertime. We sell more chocolates to sort of the local folks who are looking for a higher quality, like chocolate box to give to people. So it's just a little bit, so like I would say we have a lot of locals, but in the summertime, obviously, just because of our nature, we get more sort of tourists, but I wouldn't say that our business is reliant on them, especially with our new tour program. We have a lot more repeat customers. We have people who are more engaged with the company than they've ever been before. So it's a lot more sort of, we're trying to build up our local community again.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Madeline?
I don't see anyone in chat. If anyone has a question they'd just like to ask, feel free to unmute yourself.
Oh, over the years, I assume you have your base products that year in, year out do well for you.
Yeah.
What would be something that maybe you tried, and I'm sure you're trying some new things every now and then to expand the market. Over the years, what was one that probably didn't meet what you were hoping it would? And then if you had an example or something that you tried and really kind of exceeded what you anticipated it to be, or something that was way out there that you gave some thought to.
Yeah, I think definitely we started out our Chocolate Works program actually as a chocolate cafe in the back of Shane. I told you a little bit about that. We were making historic drinking chocolate. We were like, oh, this is going to be so big. People are going to love it. In the end, we started making chocolate from the bean to both supply our chocolate and also to make the drinks. But we found that people wanted the chocolate itself more than the drinks. I mean, that seems obvious in hindsight, but we wanted to do something a little different. So that was not as successful, but what is successful is what came from it, which is a really robust bean to bar chocolate program that we're really proud of today. I would say that recently, buttercreams, the things that basically kept the brand alive for the 20th century, are going out of fashion. A lot of younger people just don't have the palate for the very sweet buttercream anymore, even though it's what our grandparents, great grandparents have been eating forever. They want a salt sweet sort of taste. They want something a little bit more nuanced. Not to say that buttercream can't be nuanced. I love buttercreams. So we've actually been, I don't want to say shrinking our menu of buttercreams, but that's a surprising thing that we've noticed over the years. As much as we love buttercreams, it's just not as popular as it used to be. It had a good 110-year run, is what I can say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no other questions, I guess, from the group, again, I'd like to thank Laurel for taking the time out of her busy schedule today to join us. And just a reminder, Madeline did post all the websites for our speakers this afternoon. So take a look at Shane Candy's. And if you're ever in downtown Philly, stop in and talk to Laurel and taste some of their excellent chocolates.
Yeah.
Thanks,
and
Laurel.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
We're probably
thank
going to
you.
be starting our tour program again in September. So if you come
Great.
after September, I'll take you on a tour. Just email the
Great.
tours account. You'll see it.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a really good rest of the day.
Okay.
Thanks to you
Thank
again.
you.
Yeah. Bye now.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing. Our next stop is going to be to Pottsville, Pennsylvania, where we're going to visit the Yuengling, America's oldest brewery. Guiding us on this afternoon tour is going to be Debbie Yuengling. I think she's on.
Yep.
Debbie is the Employee Engagement and Culture Manager for the brewery. Debbie is a graduate of Moravian College, where she majored in accounting and minoring in marketing. Following graduation, she began working in the brewery's accounting department and now has evolved to working closer with the employees to help enhance the Yuengling culture and its values. Every day, Debbie works alongside her three sisters, Wendy, Jennifer, Cheryl, and their father, Dick Yuengling, the fifth generation owner. Debbie, I'm going to turn the program over to you at this time.
Yep, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I as well am going to share my screen. So let's make sure this works. Can you see the big screen, Yuengling?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll go
Yes.
through that. Thank you again for having me. I appreciate telling you our story and a little bit about our history. As Jean went through, so I am part of the sixth generation. So my sisters, Jennifer, Wendy, Cheryl, and I are all working here with my dad. I have personally been at the company for a little over 20 years. My role has evolved from accounting into pricing to sales administration, and currently I am the Employee Engagement and Culture Manager. So I work very closely with the employees at our three breweries, and we're just super proud to have just celebrated over our 190th anniversary. This year is our 192nd anniversary. So we are America's oldest brewery, and we are still family owned and operated. The brewery was founded in 1829 by David G. Yuengling. So that was my great grandfather. He immigrated to Pennsylvania from Germany, and he came primarily to Pottsville, Pennsylvania for the spring water that came off of the mountains right here in town. He first named the brewery the Eagle Brewery, which is why the eagle is so symbolic and prominent on our packaging and all of our brands today. And the symbol of the eagle has embodied the independence and the spirited nature of our brewery and our brands for all of these years. The original brewery was located down where Pottsville City Hall is now, and that burned down in 1831. They rebuilt in 1831 immediately on the hill site, right where it currently stands at Mahantungo Street. And that quick reconstruction of the brewery where we are now is an early sign of the company's lasting resilience and our perseverance, and basically our grit to come right back. The brewery that is currently there is also where the gift shop and our tours are. So we invite you to stop in Pottsville and come take a tour of our historic and brewery, of America's oldest brewery. It is still operating and producing beer today. And David G also built on this new location so that he could dig caves into the dig tunnels into the caves into the mountain. Back in the 1800s, there was no electric refrigeration, and you need cold temperature to keep the beer while it's in its keg, to keep it stored and aging and fermenting. You get to see the tunnels when you go through on the tours. They stay at about 43 degrees temperature year round. So it's a popular site for the tourists when they're going through the brewery. We are 6 generations. As I said, so it was my great-great-great-grandfather who started the brewery in 1829. His son Frederick took over the brewery and the business in 1873. And that's when the name changed from the Eagle Brewery to D.G. Yuengling and Son. The 3rd generation, Frank Yuengling, ran the company at the start of the 20th century, and he was the owner for 64 years. He was president during some of the toughest times in the country and for the brewery. Frank persevered through Prohibition, when we literally could not even make beer, the Great Depression. He was president during World War I and World War II. And during Prohibition, he built the dairy. This is where the gift shop now is. And they made ice cream as well as near beer during this time. Our resiliency and the strength comes from a lot of what Frank, his creativity and passion during these times in the 64 years while he was president. So my grandfather, Richard Sr., and his brother Dorman were the 4th generation to run the brewery from the 1960s to the mid-1980s. And my dad, Richard Jr., is the 5th generation. So we've persevered through lots and lots of challenges through all these generations, and we've witnessed a period of growth extremely during my dad's leadership. So my sisters and I are the 6th generation, and it will be the first time while the family business will pass from father to daughters. 4 women will lead the company for the first time in our history, which is a pretty great opportunity that we're very, very proud of. These are some photos of the 192-year-old history. It shows some of the railroads that offered some innovative marketing in the early years. On the left is a local storage depot used to keep beer and the ice cool during the railroad transportation. It also offered a new way to promote and market our brands, in addition to using the horse-drawn wagons with the beer, loading the beer on the back of it. 10 years after the brewery was constructed, the caves were dug into the mountains to store the beer. And actually lager, which is symbolic to our beer and our flagship brand, is the German word to store. So back in the 1800s, there was no electric refrigeration. So again, that's why they used the caves to keep the beer. On the bottom center photo, you're looking at employees that are in the caves. It was a messy job filling and storing the kegs, since they did it all by hand. So they had to fill the barrels with a hole in the side and then hammer the wooden bung into the side of the barrels. And then the kegs had to be lifted by hand onto the trucks and the pallets for transportation. And on the right are workers in the blacksmith shop. That was in about the late 1800s. Back then, Yuengling had their own cooper shop. And the cooper shop is where they make the metal barrels for where we used to store the beer. Every generation had their challenges. Prohibition, of course, was one of our biggest challenges when we couldn't make any beer. The 18th Amendment went into effect on January 17th, 1920. So over 100 years ago, started that 13-year ban where we couldn't sell any alcohol. And it was considered one of the biggest shakedowns in American brewing history. Our great-grandfather and 3rd generation owner, Frank, adapted and pivoted. Like I said, he used to make ice cream and near beer. Near beer is 0.5 of 1% alcohol, which was legal back then. Another brewing innovation was they made Yuengling Juvo, which was marketed as an early energy drink. So they used to make this in our Cooperage shop, and we would put that out for consumers as well when you couldn't have the high alcohol content. But we were especially known for our dairy and our ice cream that we used to make during Prohibition. The production process is pretty similar to the brewing process with the equipment. So a lot of other breweries started with making milk and dairy products during this time as well. Our ice cream plant continued until about 1985 when it shut down. Recently, it did start back up again, made by a different part of the family. So you may have seen it in some of your grocery stores. It's kind of sporadic. It's gone up and down the last 5 years, but you might still see Yuengling ice cream out there. So this is a photo of my sisters and my dad in the caves. Caves are about 40 feet wide and 150 yards in length. They're U-shaped, and they travel through underneath the mountains for several blocks. We do take the tourists down there, so you get to walk through with the water dripping off of the ceiling, completely natural. We have not done anything to it. What we did have to do, the brick wall there behind my dad, during Prohibition, the government made us install this wall to seal off the cave so that we couldn't cheat and store the beer and ferment it when we weren't supposed to be making it. So they made us put up that wall so that we weren't making beer when we weren't supposed to. So this is a photo of the dairy on the left-hand side. And in 1933, when the Prohibition was repealed, Yuengling came out with winter beer, and that was to celebrate the repeal of Prohibition. We were actually the first brewery to have a barrel of beer on President Roosevelt's steps of the White House right after Prohibition was repealed. Takes about 28 days to make a barrel of beer, but we had a barrel there right when Prohibition was repealed. So I don't know if they did any brewing when they weren't supposed to, but I think they had an idea it was going to come to an end anyway. And in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, they were very lean times for the company, specifically for my grandfather and for his brother Dorman. They struggled to keep the regional brewery afloat, and they did their best to modernize the business as best they could with efficiencies, but many of the local breweries were starting to shut down. National marketing initiatives from the bigger breweries were taking off. Interstate transportation was starting, and that took a toll on a lot of the local smaller breweries. These are photos of my dad and my grandfather standing outside of the Pottsville Brewery. And then the 5th generation owner, so that's my dad, Richard Yuengling Jr. He's the current president. He bought the brewery in 1985 when the brewery was at a very low point. Seeing the brewery struggle and to survive his dad's time, it influenced him to want to run the business and make it thrive. He had strong respect for traditions of the generations before him. So he was willing to take some risks and reinvent the beer portfolio of the brands that he was putting out. And he came up with some new ideas in the 1990s. It was still a challenging time for the beer industry, but he wanted to persevere and continue with the brewery. So in 1987, my dad reintroduced a favorite recipe that is now known as our flagship beer, traditional lager. He spoke with our brewmaster back then, Ray Norbert, and they collaborated to develop the traditional lager with the color and the flavor of the brand now that is so popular. Sales from the lager took off tremendously in the 1990s, and it surpassed our production and what we were able to supply at that point in time. So to tell you a little bit about the ingredients, so our hops for the beer are produced in the Yakima Valley from the state of Washington. Depending on the beer, some of the new specialty and seasonal beers, we do import some of the hops from Germany. Hops are actually a flower, kind of similar to what you see on the bottom right. They're shaped like a cone. What they do is crush this flour into a powder form, and then they form it into pellets. Looks a little bit like rabbit food. And then it's those pellets that are thrown into the final kettle for the brewing process. There's no alcohol in hops, but that's where you get the aroma and the taste of beer. And the malt that we use, it's a malt germinated cereal grain that's been dried. It's grown in Canada and parts of North Dakota and Wisconsin. The grain germinates by soaking in water, and then the starch is converted into sugars. And then this is what combines with the yeast to form alcohol to make the beer. We also use corn grits that are sourced from Missouri and Wisconsin. The corn grits add a little bit of sweetness and also the smoothness to beer. It releases some sugar that again combines with the yeast to form alcohol. So it's the cooking time of your beer. If you cook the beer a little bit longer, it cooks off more sugar, so then you don't have as much sugar, and that could also give you a light beer. So it's the cooking time and the amount of sugars that determines the amount of alcohol in a beer. So a little bit about our footprint. I had mentioned earlier that when the lager came out, we were running short on capacity. We had the one brewery in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. They produced about 130,000 barrels of beer at that point in time. So my dad needed to make a decision. Does he expand? Does he build a brewery? What was his next step? What did he want to do? So he decided to build another brewery in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, which is the Mill Creek Brewery that you see on the bottom. And that started construction in 1999. It opened up for production in 2001. During this time in 2000, my dad bought a brewery, an old Stroh brewery down in Tampa, Florida. So adding these two breweries took our capacity up to about 1.5 million barrels that we were able to produce. And during this time is when we also started expanding some of our states. So when we opened up Florida, this allowed us to close the states and the gap down from Pennsylvania along the eastern coast. So currently we sell in 22 states. We go as far west as Indiana, Arkansas, Louisiana, and that is supplied by the 3 breweries. We have about 350 employees within our 3 breweries. And of course, we're opening up Texas in about 1 month. So we're super excited for that. That's going to open up with our joint venture with Molson Coors. So it's a joint venture with Molson Coors, but it is still independently owned by the Yuengling family. And today presents some of its challenges, especially for different industries with COVID. The effects of COVID are felt throughout all of the breweries. They shut down all of the bars and restaurants. So we have about 50% of our business was on premise, which means it was draft beer or the beer was bought at a bar or a restaurant. So to shut down those restaurants hurt quite a bit. And we had to bring those barrels back and dump the beer last March when everything was closing. So that was something that, obviously hurt us, but we persevered. We were very resilient. We created some of these signs. We got involved like other companies did. Our off-premise, where people were buying packages of bottles and cans, took off. People were staying home and drinking new products. Last March is also when we came out with our latest release, Flight by Yuengling, and that came out and did very well with the packaged beer for our consumers. So today, my sisters and I all work in the family business. We work alongside my dad. He is still very much involved in the company. As I said, he started in 1985 and he is still here every day. He drives the trucks. He is a production nut. So he is kind of down on the floor with the packaging line for the most part. But it's given us a really great opportunity to develop and grow on our own and to find what interests us and use our skill set. Each of us has found our own niche. Like I said, I'm now in employee engagement. My sister Jennifer, who is the second from the right, she is vice president of operations. My sister Cheryl in the middle, she is involved in IT and a lot of the computer work as well as order services. And then Wendy, who's the second from the left, she's in administration, accounting, finance, HR, so she oversees just about all the decisions that happen here. So it works really well for the 4 of us to collaborate, work in different departments of the company, and then learning from my dad still. We're super excited. Coming in early 2022 down in Tampa, Florida, we are building a Tampa campus. So the brewery that we bought down there sits on about 20 acres of land. So there was at least 10 to 12 that was sitting unused. So what we decided to do down there was to break ground and build a hotel and a restaurant and gift shop area. So there's going to be a restaurant that seats about 250 people. There will have a retail store. There will be a courtyard out in the back with a pavilion with bands and music. So we opened up the brewery in 1999 down there, and it was in northern Tampa. And they have been such a welcoming community to us. So it was just a way for us to give back, but also to capitalize on the location. USF, University of Southern Florida, is right next to the brewery, as well as Busch Gardens, ironically. So we are sandwiched between those two locations. So there's a lot of tourists, a lot of people coming into that area. So having the restaurant with private dining and cuisine, outdoor gaming area, on-site hotel is going to be a great opportunity for the community and for us as a company. And we're really excited to open that up. That's going to open up probably early of 2022. And I mentioned that we were opening up Texas about the end of August. So that is through the Yuengling Company, which is our joint venture with Molson Coors. We announced that last September. So that will be our first expansion state that we have done since we opened up Kentucky, which I believe was in early 2019, the end of 2018. So we're really excited to have the Yuengling Company being headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas. And it's allowing us to take our beer west to consumers that we just don't have the capacity and really the logistics to transport the beer from Pottsville or Tampa to go west to some of the states like Oklahoma or Colorado, Chicago, Texas. So being able to work with the brewers or using the facility there in Fort Worth, we're able to make our beers and then sell it out to the consumers that are right there. So it's a really unique opportunity where we're still maintaining our quality, independence, and above all, our family ownership for sure. So here's the portfolio of all of our brands. We have the traditional lager, which is the flagship beer. So typically when you go into a restaurant and you order a Yuengling, you're going to get a lager. We have the light lager 99, which just came out about 2 weeks ago with lower carbs, still 99 calories, great taste if you like the lager, but you're looking for that light beer. We have the Black and Tan, which is an awesome combination of 60% porter, 40% premium. So it's a really great, smooth blend of those two beers, and it's a great combination. Some of you might remember way back when in the 70s and 80s, they used to have a half and half. It was done manually, but it was, excuse me, half porter, half Chesterfield ale. It was just a little stronger. The ale was a little stronger alcohol content. So we felt the Black and Tan with a 60-40 blend was a little bit smoother for consumers. We also have the Golden Pilsner, which came out in 2017. That was the first release for us as a sixth generation. That was the first time in almost 20 years we had come out with a new brand. So we were really excited for this Pilsner beer, which is extremely sessionable, easy to drink, more for an outdoor sporting event, things like that. Of course, we have our Flight by Yuengling, which is an upscale light beer, 2.6 carbs, 4.2% alcohol. It's for that health conscious drinker that wants to still have their beer, but they're watching their calories, watching the carbs, an amazing taste, super refreshing. And then we just released the Raging Eagle, which is a mango flavored beer, which is phenomenal. It's 6% alcohol, but it has just the right taste of the fruit in it that just is really refreshing, really great in the summer. Some of our staples are the Lord Chesterfield Ale. That has been around since the since the original 1829. So Chesterfield Ale and our dark brewed porter have been around since the beginning. We are actually the #1 producer of porter in the country. So those are both really great beers if you're able to grab a 6-pack of that. Oktoberfest is still one of our seasonals. It's a Marzen style beer that comes out around usually the end of August. It's one of those where with seasonal, it comes out a little early, but it'll be out through October, great for the fall. And then of course, our Yuengling Hershey's Chocolate Porter, not to overplay Shane Confectionery, but we partnered with Hershey's Chocolate 2 years ago, actually that'll be 3 years now, we partnered with Hershey's Chocolate, who are about 40 minutes down the road. We partnered with them to come up with the chocolate porter. It's an amazing blend of our porter, dark brewed porter, and the nibs with the chocolate. It's a really smooth taste, almost type of a dessert beer, great with some dark meats, cheesecake for dessert. When we first came out with it, it was in our tri-state footprint, and it was on draft only. Last year we came out with it in bottles, and it was in our 22 states. So you can get it anywhere you are, and it will be out again this fall in all of our markets. And something that's important to us is connecting with our fans, our commitment to the future for sure, and listening to the consumers. You know, we came out with the Flight by Yuengling because consumers are looking for an upscale light beer. They're being health conscious. They're concerned about the carbs and calories. Same thing with the Raging Eagle. They were looking for a single serve beer, a 24-ounce can that they could just grab in a grocery store or a convenience store. So we're watching consumers and listening to them. And a lot of that is through social media. So these are some examples. We've been partnering with Lauren Elena. She is a country singer who was, I believe, a winner on American Idol. So we partner with her as our flight ambassador. Up in the top middle is country star Lee Brice. He's an American country singer and songwriter. We have used him to kick off some of our lager. And I don't know if any of you have seen his video, We Need More Beer. Lots of lager in the background. It's a really awesome video. Our marketing team had a phenomenal time going down there and putting that together for him for the background. And the top right is celebrity chef Kelsey Bernard Clark. She won, it's not Iron Chef, Top Chef, sorry.
Top Chef.
She won Top Chef, I believe it was back in 2018. And then she's with my sister Cheryl, who does a lot of collaborations with food recipes and the beer as well. So they partnered together to develop some different recipes. You can find all of the ones that they have done on our website, but they're always coming out with new ones. They have a great mac and cheese that they've done with the traditional lager. They've used the Hershey's chocolate porter for a few desserts and things. So that's always great to check out. And then in the bottom right, we also partnered with the US soccer player Rose Lavelle. So keep an eye out for her in the Olympics this year with the US soccer team. And if you follow the Phillies, we're also, of course, partnered with Aaron Nola as the pitcher. He was someone that was special for us during COVID last year. He partnered with HARP, Hospitality Assistance and Response of PA. So he was someone special to have on our team as well. These are just some photos of some of our recipes that you can go out and grill. Telling you a little bit about how we partner with Hershey Park. They have the 1829 Pavilion. So if you happen to be traveling and going to Hershey Park, check that out. Down in Tampa in Busch Gardens and at SeaWorld, they have the Yuengling Pub. You can go and get the Hershey's Chocolate Porter. They have our Golden Pilsner. They have all the different beers there. And then just briefly, I kind of wanted to touch on our company culture, our shared values of respect for tradition, our integrity, hard work, simplicity, and pride. And these values and the behaviors of what we've learned from the generations of owners and the employees before us have evolved for our culture and have developed the Yuengling way. And that's how we operate each and every day. We tell stories. You know, we have employees that have worked here for 30, 40 years. And you learn a lot by talking to the guy that's on the line next to you that worked with my dad or my grandfather, because we do still have people here that have worked with my grandfather. And so we encourage the employees just to tell stories to new employees, the new hires. That helps create the behavior and the culture of who we are. It's, again, like I said, it's influenced by previous generations of not only owners, but also the employees. It's basically about resilience, grit, and perseverance. And that's who we are as a company. You know, we've made it almost 200 years and we're really proud of that. So I don't know, do we have time to show the real quick 10-minute video? Or if not, we can send the link, but I have it here if we want to show it.
I think we still have time, Debbie.
If you have time. So here's a real quick 10-minute, gives you a little bit of history of the company. Let me see if I can. get out of here if it's coming up. Are you seeing it?
Not yet.
All right, let's try this. Let's try it this way.
Do you know you could refrigerate beer in a cave? That's how they did it here for quite some time. Founded in 1829, DGO.
Sorry, wrong one. We can go back because that link didn't work. And I will not show you the.
This seaside Verbo is about to play host to an unforgettable vacation memory.
United States landed in Philadelphia and
Can you see and hear it? Is it working?
We hear it, but we don't see it.
Noise about the American dream.
If we don't see it.
We're taught that it's there for the
Hear it,
taking,
hear it.
but you have to want it. You have to be willing to work for it.
Now?
There we go. We're good.
So we go to work.
We're good now.
That becomes who we are. A nation of dreamers, chasing a shared vision of success. Generation after generation after generation. Realizing our dreams the only way that we know how. Through hard work, perseverance, and earning respect. D.G. Yingling & Son was founded in 1829 by German immigrant David Gottlieb Yingling. In the near 2 centuries that followed, the reins of the old brewery on Mahontongo Street have passed down through 5 generations, each owner leaving their mark on the family business, guiding it through the triumphs and trials of their times to become America's oldest brewery.
I went over to Germany a couple years ago, and we found out that the founder, David G. Yingling, his father started brewing beer in 1816, and I think that DG was the youngest of the children and had no chance of ever taking over the brewery. So I guess in 1828, he set sail for the United States, landed in Philadelphia, and coal had been discovered about 25 years earlier up in this area. So these little towns were growing and growing. I mean, Pottsville went from like 250 people to 500 to 1,000, and it was getting bigger and bigger, and it was a good place for a brewery to begin with.
But he specifically chose Pottsville as well because of the natural spring water. Very soft water, which was very good for brewing German-style beers, and also because there were hills.
There was no refrigeration in those days. There was no electricity. So you had to keep your beer cold underground in caves.
We're now coming into the famous Yingling Caves. They were dug in the mid-1800s, all by local coal miners. And the purpose was to age the beer, lager the beer at a long, slow process.
You don't have a full appreciation for the tunnels that were dug underneath this brewery until you actually go down and experience it.
I love the caves. I think they're unique. I think there's so much history. You know, DG was down there, and Frederick and Frank. I mean, there's the history here.
DG had 3 sons, David Jr., Frederick, and William. David Jr. opened his own brewery in Richmond, Virginia, and William passed away at the age of 36. Frederick joined his father's business in 1873, changing the name to D.G. Yingling & Son. Frederick passed in 1899, leaving control of the family business to his only son, Frank.
My grandfather was 21 years old in 1899. He got a message that his father died, and he had to come home and run the brewery, which was deeply in debt because they had just built all these buildings and borrowed money to do it.
As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the looming specter of the prohibition of the sale of alcohol was very real to Americans and American breweries.
At that point, we were almost 100 years old. So for a company to make it that long is monumental. And to know that your business is about to change dramatically because the product you make is no longer allowed, I think it had to be terrifying.
It's very difficult to imagine what that time period was like when Prohibition began. What do? You employ people, and you know, what do you do with your business when the government suddenly comes in and says you can't make this product anymore? One of the ways we are still here today is the creativity that Frank Yuengling had back in the 1930s. Not only did he start the ice cream business, but he made near beer as well. Near beer is 0.5% alcohol, which was legal in those days.
Frank Yuengling had steered the brewery through some of the darkest times in its history. And upon his death in 1963, the fourth generation of Yuengling ownership, that of Dorman and Richard L. Yuengling, began. 8 years later, Dorman would pass away, leaving Richard the sole proprietor of his family's business.
Looking back to the generation when my grandfather and his brother controlled the brewery, probably around the 1950s, 1960s, so many small local town breweries were either bought up by the mega breweries, they went out of business, the families didn't have any interest in them anymore.
Without the capital to invest in modernizing the brewery, production had fallen off. Just barely surviving, D.G. Yuengling and Son was at a crossroads. Dick Yuengling took the reins of America's oldest brewery, knowing he had two choices: grow or fold.
When the time came in 1985 where my dad was able to come back and implement some of his ideas, we were at a low point. We were only producing 137,000 barrels of beer, and this place was barely running 5 days a week. But he had the insight and just had a feeling and an instinct of the things that he wanted to do to increase that capacity.
I just made up my mind. I wasn't put on this earth to struggle just to sell a case of beer. I wasn't going to do that. And that's when we developed the lager brand.
We had an incredibly good brewmaster for a long time, Ray Norbert, that my dad had the utmost confidence in.
He was employed here for probably 57 or 59 years, and he was a brewmaster for 37 out of those years.
I got a call. I came up to the brewery, and Ray and Norbert were back in his office. In the meantime, what they did, they were experimenting, and when they came up with a lager brand. As soon as I tasted it, I knew it was a home run.
But it wasn't just the lager, it was setting itself apart, maybe a little bit of a higher standard.
And then as time went on, I get the phone call from Dick. Dick being Dick. He said, I was thinking, I said, what are you thinking? He said, about bottles.
Everybody's got a brown bottle. Let's use a green bottle.
I wanted a green bottle because it projected an imported image.
And he came up with a Cadillac of a package. It was unbelievable. And that struck a fire.
We were selling way more than the brewery could sustain capacity-wise.
So my dad was at a point where he didn't know what to do. Should he build a brewery? Should he buy a brewery?
Let's build a brewery. And we started building it probably in September of that same year.
And for Christmas that year, my sisters and I, we got him a gift to the Phillies fantasy camp. And it just so happens that a Stroh plant that was built in the 1950s in Tampa, Florida, was, lo and behold, for sale.
So I called Bill Henry, who was then the president, and I said, I'll buy it. That's how the whole thing came about. And I came back and I told David, I said, we're going to buy a plant in Tampa, Florida. I could see his eyes rolling around in his head because I never told anybody I was going to do this.
That sort of defines who Dick is. His mind was already made up and nobody was going to tell him otherwise.
We sent him to baseball camp and he came back with a brewery.
I don't think the older generations ever thought it would be where it is today. I'm proud to be a part of it and to know that those were my family members that grew it to where it needs to be, particularly my dad. He worked hard.
He took it over when it was on the verge of closing. He grew it from nothing to what it is today.
Having a family-owned business is just so important to me because there's not very many of them left, whether it's in the beer business or any other business. You know, to think, I get like a little emotional that 4 other generations put their time in here, and this goes back 155 years ago. Somebody kept this thing going, even through Prohibition. That's pretty rewarding, you know? I got 4 healthy daughters. As long as they work hard and carry on the tradition of this company, these kids will be fine. You don't have to be the biggest. You don't have to be the most successful in anything you do. Just do it well. And that, to me, is great.
Well, pretty much just going to stop sharing right on that. Any questions? Can you still hear me?
Yes, Debbie.
Anyone have any questions?
Um,
I think we have one right now.
Do you still have a connection with the dairy? And there's my second question was, during Prohibition, World War I, or 2 times, are there any stories that you can or are willing to share that you found really interesting that were carried down through the years and all?
Steve, we can't hear you on that computer.
Okay.
That's not gonna work. Who's up?
Sorry.
Hey, if you'd like to type your question in the chat, we can read it to Debbie.
Are any down there? How did the craft and microbrewery movement impact your dad's business? That's actually really interesting because that had a lot of impact with consumers starting to drink the smaller breweries, a little bit of a different taste. They wanted the hoppier beers. They wanted some lager beers, a little more quality. And they were moving away from, I don't want to say the 3 big ones, but you had your Bud Miller Coors, which are, you know, they're all good companies, but I think consumers were starting to look at what's local. It was the craft brewery phase. So in a way that benefited us. And I think my dad was slightly ahead of his time just by coming out with the lager and sensing that, you know, this was how consumers were going to start drinking. So it was beneficial for us. You know, now in a way, sometimes it hurts because consumers go into the bar and they'll say, what do you have local, instead of going for their staple Yuengling beer and their favorite or their familiar one. But at the same time, it's a good thing for us. So it goes both ways. But right now there's probably a little over 8,000 breweries in the country, whereas about 20 years ago, there was about 2,000. So it's really, really grown. I mean, there's just astronomical number of breweries, and then they can sell just about anywhere. So you can get a craft brew anywhere you're looking for one. Do we still have the dairy? The dairy building we still have. The dairy building is where the gift shop and museum is located, right across the street from the brewery. But the actual dairy where the ice cream is made, that closed down in 1985. A cousin restarted it about 5-8 years ago. And then he sold his portion of it to a company in Atlanta, I think. I'm not really sure. So like I had mentioned, there is still Yuengling ice cream out there, but it's not from us as the beer family. Anything else? I mean, there's a lot to say. Hopefully I condensed that in 200 years just about into,
Yeah, it's very good.
I don't know how much time I did, but you know, just wanted to give you an overall gist of our history and a timeline and a little bit about our values and our culture and our company and who we are. Any other questions?
Excellent job, Debbie. Excellent job, Debbie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was great getting to
We
see
really
all of you.
appreciate being on. Thanks again.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah. You know, Debbie, I think we had one more question. Were there any interesting stories from Prohibition, World War I, or World War II told down through the generations? Or?
That's a really great question. I guess the Prohibition stories would be, I don't have too many from the World Wars, but the Prohibition stories would be, like I had said, that, you know, we had the barrel of beer right on the White House steps right away. There was always stories of pipelines, you know, running underground, and they were feeding it throughout the neighborhood, things like that. You know, the beer was being able to be brewed and they were smuggling it out, basically. What they were also doing, they were able to make the near beer. And I think because porter is so brewed with the dark malt, it's very high in iron. So they were prescribing that to pregnant women. They were still doing it back in the 60s and 70s, but they did this during Prohibition as well. So that was another brew that they were trying to still promote and keep making during Prohibition, just because they were saying it was for medicinal purposes. So they were doing the best they could to keep still drinking the beer.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks again, Debbie, very much. Paul, I'm going to turn the program back over to you for our next presenter.
Thank you, Gene. Man, that was interesting, Debbie. I had spent some of my formative years at Penn State in the late 70s with a whole bunch of roommates and neighbors who were all from Pottsville. And that kind of started my interest in Yuengling beer whenever their buddies would come up for a weekend with a barrel of beer, it seemed like.
That's
Awesome.
good.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of the things that Debbie mentioned, and if the name Yuengling is German, of course, and the area where the brewery is in the heart of what's kind of considered Pennsylvania Dutch country. I'm not Pennsylvania Dutch. My background is Welsh and Scottish, but grew up with a lot of people who spoke Pennsylvania Dutch and the whole German part of that part of Pennsylvania. And boy, I found somebody who does an awful lot. He's got a background in German. He actually speaks 5 languages, I learned, but a strong interest in the Pennsylvania Dutch heritage and culture, and you know, he's offered to speak to us. So I'm just going to turn it over to Doug Mattenford and sit back and listen to the Pennsylvania Dutchman.
Well, thank you, Paul, and hopefully everyone can hear me as we start up this new technology here. Am I coming through okay, Paul, since you're the one that's showing up on my screen? All right, wonderful. Debbie, I got to catch the last 15 minutes of your presentation, having grown up in Berks County, right south of Pottsville, actually not far from Hamburg. We always had a keg of Yuengling Premium in the back of our farmhouse. My father gave a lot of money to your company over the years, and I partook quite often as well. So yeah, a brewery that I'm very well familiar with, and a very, very famous story as well. So congratulations on the long history that you guys have, and continued success in the future for sure. Paul, that was a nice segue into the Pennsylvania Dutch. As I mentioned just now, yeah, Yuengling is in what we consider Pennsylvania Dutch country there in Schuylkill County. Schuylkill County kind of is the northern boundary of what we consider Pennsylvania Dutch country. I don't know how many people here on the Zoom are from Pennsylvania or have any knowledge of the Pennsylvania Dutch. So I'm going to act as if nobody knows anything, and that will hopefully then cover all the bases. I'm going to share my screen. Presenter view. Okay. All right. So that's a long title for what I'm going to talk about today, but it's really going to boil down to one thing. I want to cover who are the Pennsylvania Dutch, where do we come from, what are we as a people, and where do we fit into the American story, and where might we fit in or survive as time goes on. So as the topic reads there, we are an ethnic minority culture and language. What a lot of times people forget, that there is a language out there too. So here's kind of the overview, or as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, an Überblick of the story that I want to tell today. And as Paul said, yes, I do speak a lot of languages, and my background academically is German, but I was born and raised on a Pennsylvania Dutch farm with 12th generation here in the United States. My grandmother's family bought land from the Penns in the 1700s in the Ole Valley, which is in southeastern Berks County, Pennsylvania. I was lucky enough that all four of my grandparents were of Pennsylvania Dutch stock. They still spoke the language when I was a kid in the 80s. My parents both spoke Pennsylvania Dutch, so I was raised bilingually, essentially, with Pennsylvania Dutch and English. That made the transition to studying German in high school and college rather easy, but there are differences, and I will talk about that today. So that's kind of my background. I'm as pure blood Pennsylvania Dutch, I guess, as they come. So that's kind of my background, and I've been working with the language and the culture here professionally for the last 15 years or so, going on 20 years now. So we want to talk about who make up the Pennsylvania Dutch, a little bit of an overview of our culture, an overview of our language, talk about the new generation, the children right now, and then possibly looking to the future. And of course, Q&A, of course, we'll have hopefully at the end. And if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask. So let's talk about the Pennsylvania Dutch as a people. Pennsylvania Dutch is an umbrella term. I like to always think of it as an umbrella. And underneath that umbrella is a lot of different people. Most people that grow up in the United States and are not in Pennsylvania, or were not raised around Pennsylvania Dutch culture, the only thing people think of is Amish. You must all be Amish, right? When you tell someone you're Pennsylvania Dutch, oh, well, you're not Amish. So when were you Amish? Did you leave the Amish church? I mean, these are the things that you get when you travel outside of Pennsylvania and you run into people and they find out you're Pennsylvania Dutch. I always like to tell people there's one thing to remember. All Amish are Pennsylvania Dutch, but not all Pennsylvania Dutch are Amish. And we can break the Pennsylvania Dutch people into two main categories. There on the left are the sectarians, which are known as the plain people, and the two big groups, of course, are the Amish and the Mennonites. Now, underneath both of those bullet points, there are various types of Amish and there's various types of Mennonites. Some of you are probably familiar with the idea of there are very conservative old order groups in both of these. There are Mennonites that still use horse and buggy, but then there are also Mennonites out there that drive cars and have electricity in their homes. So those are your sectarians, because they came over in sects, and I'll talk about where they come from here in a little bit. And then the other side, the right-hand column, were the non-sectarians. These were sometimes called the fancy Dutch or the church Dutch. And when we look at our history, the largest percentage of our population from that group come from these Protestant faiths: Lutheran, the Reformed Church, which eventually would turn into the United Church of Christ, today's UCC, the Moravians, the Huguenots, which were German-speaking French from the eastern part of France, the Alsace and Lorraine, Protestants who left France, came to the New World, and groups like the Old River Brethren. There are other groups that I could add to this. There were some really small splinter Protestant groups, but when we think of the major groups, these are it. Now, today, at one point in our history, our religion really defined who we were, whether we fell into the plain people or we fell into the fancy people. Nowadays, we have to remember that, the percentage of Americans that are active in a faith or in a church, that is a declining number. So that's also going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch as time moves forward. Will faith continue to play a role in defining who we are as a people or not? And, the answer for that is unknown at this point. We all start our history, unsere Geschichte. I like to throw the English and the Pennsylvania Dutch at you just in case, so you can hear it if you've never heard it before. Our story all begins in 1683, when the very first group of Pennsylvania Dutch arrive in the New World. A group of Mennonites that were living in the Rhine River Valley of Germany, at the invitation of William Penn and the opportunity to own land came available. They boarded the ship the Concord in Amsterdam and sailed to the New World, landing in Philadelphia. That would be the very first group of Germans to set foot in colonial America in 1683. And from that point on, more and more and more would continue to come. As mentioned, we did come at the invitation of William Penn. William Penn, for all the things that he was a very shrewd businessman in certain regards. He knew that this area of Germany, the Rhine River Valley, had been experiencing some rough years in the past. There had been a lot of war. There had been a lot of upheaval. There had been some years of bad harvests. Times were not good. And he had all this land to sell in Pennsylvania. And being a Quaker, one of the tenets of the Quaker faith was tolerance of other religions, tolerance of other people. He often said this would be his holy experiment. Didn't matter what religion you practiced, you are welcome here in Pennsylvania. So these German groups took him up on it, had the opportunity. He had hired agents to sail up and down the Rhine River to get out off the boats, go into the countryside and promote and try to sell these lands that he had for sale to these Germanic peoples. Some people took the opportunity and left because of religious persecution. That's always the answer you learn in elementary school. Why did people come to the New World? Because of religious persecution. Well, for some people, that's true. When we look at groups like the Amish and the Mennonite, they had been heavily persecuted. When the Amish and the Mennonite faith first began in the 1500s in Switzerland, they were burned alive. A lot of them were rounded up and forced to live in caves to hide out. They were groups that truly were never welcomed anywhere they went because they were seen as the weirdos, the outsiders, the radicals. They were practicing adult baptism, went against everything that the Europeans at the time, the Christian Europeans, held dear. So they were truly coming to the New World in search of to get away from religious persecution. But the vast majority of the Pennsylvania Dutch that come to Pennsylvania, in the 1600s, 1700s, were not coming because of that. They were coming for a better life, the opportunity to own land, the opportunity to make a life of their own. They were trying to get out of the thumb of old feudal Europe where they couldn't own land because your local lord or your local prince owned the land and you were forced to give part of your harvest to him. Some of the old tenets of feudalism were still at play in the Rhineland. So it was an opportunity to, make a better life, make a new life. And most Pennsylvania Dutch scholars will use the year 1840 as a cutoff. If your family came post 1840, they don't fall under the quote of the Pennsylvania Dutch. The reason we use that year is because the majority of the Pennsylvania Dutch that came prior to 1840 were all coming from the same geographical region. Post 1840, we see a major revolution in what is today Germany. There was a push for democracy, freedom. They had seen what had happened in the United States. They'd seen what happened in France during the French Revolution. And we start to see Germans and German-speaking peoples from other parts of Germany starting to immigrate to the United States. And culturally, linguistically, they were different from the people that had come prior to 1840. So that's kind of the cutoff year to be considered Pennsylvania Dutch. For geographical purposes, here's a map of Germany. Now, this is not accurate in the sense of these red lines, but I put a box rectangle around the region of Europe that we're talking about where the vast majority of Pennsylvania Dutch came from. You can see the Rhine River Valley there, of course, of the Rhine River. And notice that I do have the box extended over into Eastern France because we did have Eastern French Huguenots that came to the New World, and also Northern Switzerland because that's where all of your Mennonite and your Amish came from. They originated in Switzerland, made their way north into Germany. They stayed in this part of Germany. At the time, it wasn't Germany. It was called the Holy Roman Empire. Germany wouldn't become Germany as we know it until 1870. So at the time of the 1600s and early 1700s, this was an empire, a loose empire of all these different principalities and dukedoms and duchies and all of this kind of stuff. So there was no unified country that they were coming from, but this is the geographical region that they came from. So most likely if you are Pennsylvania Dutch, or if someone in your family tree immigrated to Pennsylvania before 1840, I would be willing to put $100 on my table that we could do the research and your family would come from inside this red rectangle. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. But it's a pretty safe bet that you came from this region if you settled in Pennsylvania between 1683 and at least 1800 for sure. And for those of you that are not familiar with our great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, again, these lines I boxed in what is considered Pennsylvania Dutch country. This is the region of Pennsylvania where the vast majority of the Pennsylvania Dutch settled when they first came over. The real hot zone would be the counties of Berks, Lancaster, Lebanon, York, Montgomery, Lehigh, Bucks, Northampton, Carbon, Schuylkill. We just heard from the Yingling family there in Schuylkill County. And then, through the time of the Revolution, of course, the frontier kept moving north and west through Pennsylvania, and the Germans and the Pennsylvania Dutch continued to move and buy farmland, create farmland as as America grew. And today you will have descendants of the Pennsylvania Dutch that have now moved beyond and way outside of these red lines. There's a large percentage of Amish in, for example, Center County and Mifflin County. They moved there to get farmland as farmland became too expensive in Lancaster County, for example, as the country, as Pennsylvania grew and as the country grew. I could talk for hours about this topic, so I wanted to pick just a couple things that maybe A, you didn't know, or B, you can relate to the Pennsylvania Dutch for after this conversation is over. We have a strong influence on the history of the United States, even though we were a small group of people, really, when we think about us in comparison to the number of English colonists that were here, the number of Scotch-Irish colonists that would come over. But when we look at the development and early history of the United States, the Pennsylvania Dutch are absolutely in that story. We think of, I chose two names. Conrad Weiser, if you're not familiar with him, was a Pennsylvania Dutchman who settled in western Berks County around the town of Womelsdorf, and he became an agent for William Penn and the Penn family. Conrad Weiser had a gift of languages. He had learned a number of Native American languages. He had spent some time with the Lenni Lenape, with the Susquehannocks, with these tribes that were then on the frontier, what we consider around the area of the Susquehanna River today. And he had traveled back and forth between their settlements and back with Philadelphia, forming peace treaties with the Native Americans. And again, a tip of the hat to the Penn family and early Pennsylvania history. Pennsylvania is one of the few colonies that made it a point to live peaceably with these native populations, unlike some of the other colonies in North America at the time. And a lot of that had to do with the success of Conrad Weiser. Now, eventually, we would break some of those peace treaties, sadly, but Conrad Weiser really helped create a friendship and a relationship between the native populations of Pennsylvania and the Germans, the Pennsylvania Dutch, the English that were here at the time. And then I would also like to highlight the Muhlenberg family, another Pennsylvania Dutch group. Henry Melchior Muhlenberg, the first Muhlenberg to come over, is considered the father of the Lutheran Church in the United States. He had a large family. His son would become the very first speaker of the House of Representatives in the United States in American history. Today, we have Muhlenberg College in Allentown that's founded or named in honor of the Muhlenberg family. So those are just two names that I'd throw out, Conrad Weiser and Muhlenberg. Culturally, there's a couple things we can also give a tip of the hat to the Pennsylvania Dutch for, and let's start with the Easter Bunny. Of course, all Americans or most Americans today that are practicing Christians, of course, at Easter, and even those that aren't practicing Christians will still maybe play the part of the Easter Bunny with their family, laying out eggs and all that kind of stuff. Those traditions, the Pennsylvania Dutch brought with them from the old country, from the Germanic-speaking region of Europe. The very first depiction of an Easter Bunny in colonial America was drawn by a Pennsylvania Dutchman, Gilbert. I can't remember his first name, Johann, I think. That's an image of it there on the left. And as we can see, there is the Easter Bunny, of course, with his basket of eggs. That was drawn in the late 1700s, early 1800s, somewhere around there. I don't have the exact date off the top of my head. But this was the first depiction of an Easter Bunny here in the United States. And again, it was the Pennsylvania Dutch that brought this tradition with them. And of course, everyone in the United States is familiar with Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil, there I have an image. Punxsutawney Phil is, I guess, the banner groundhog for Groundhog Day. However, he's not the only groundhog in town. Most people outside of Pennsylvania Dutch country have no idea that this tradition of Groundhog Day was brought by the Pennsylvania Dutch, and I'll tell that story here in a second. And there are many famous Pennsylvania Dutch groundhogs throughout Pennsylvania Dutch country, each giving their own weather forecast on the 2nd of February. Punxsutawney Phil is the one that gets the most media coverage, but he's not the only groundhog in town. So for those of you maybe that aren't familiar or always get this story mixed up, what is the story behind Groundhog Day? Well, it is celebrated on the 2nd of February, which traditionally in the church calendar year was known as Candlemas. It was a day when candles usually were brought to a church and blessed. In medieval Europe and in Europe prior to us traveling to the New World, of course, groundhogs are a North American animal. So there were no groundhogs in Germany, but there were badgers, and that was the animal that was used. Traditionally, around the 2nd of February, the badgers would come up out of their hibernation, and this was an old farmer's rule that, of course, if the sun was shining. So the rule is if the groundhog sees his shadow, he's scared and runs back into his ground. It's kind of counterintuitive. So if the 2nd of February is a sunny day winter is here to stay. However, if the groundhog comes out, doesn't see his shadow, spring is right around the corner because he'll stick out, he'll stay around. Now, in the Rhine River Valley, it is customary that that's actually holds pretty true. If there is a high front that comes through in around early February, winter will tend to stick around. If it's a low front, it's cloudy, spring usually does arrive a little early. Now, that weather-wise does not happen here in Pennsylvania, but they brought this tradition with them, the Germans did, and of course, got here, couldn't find any badgers in Pennsylvania, but they found a lot of groundhogs. So we adopted the groundhog as our animal because he too traditionally would come out of his lair, maybe for the first time in early February. Sometimes he'd go back in, sometimes he'd stay out. So that's where that tradition comes from. And you know, this was a tradition that now if you buy a calendar in the United States, most likely on February 2nd, it's printed on there, Groundhog Day. And of course, it's not celebrated throughout the United States, but in Pennsylvania, it is still celebrated. It's still celebrated. Let's just say that. I'll go back here. Some other things I want to talk about. The Belsnickel. Well, I think I have a picture of him. Let's talk about Christmas traditions in the Belsnickel. So, of course, we in the United States, most people Christmas time celebrate as their gift giver Santa Claus. What I would share with you is that the idea of Santa Claus that we know today, again, was an idea brought from Europe to America, of course. The image on the left there is the very first that we know of printed caricature of Santa Claus as we recognize him today. It was drawn by Thomas Nast, who was a Pennsylvania Dutchman living in Philadelphia in the 1800s. He had been commissioned to draw this image for a newspaper. He took the ideas of the gift giver that he had known back in the old country, which was not a jolly man with a reindeer and sleigh. I mean, those were ideas that came about later. The original gift giver in the Rhine Valley and in this area where the Pennsylvania Dutch come from is there on the right, which is the Belsnickel. Now, when you look at that guy, you would not necessarily want him coming into your house at night, would you? He's usually clad in fur. Some people interpret him to have antlers on his hat. His face is always dirty and smutty. A lot of times the tradition says that he carries with him a switch or a bundle of sticks, and then a small gift bag. The Belsnickel translates essentially, his name comes from pels, which is fur, a fur of an animal, where we get the word pelt from in English, and nickel meaning the diminutive form of Nicholas. You know, traditionally in European culture, Saint Nicholas was this gift giver of myrrh in Turkey way back, thousands of years ago, or in early Christian Europe. So this tradition of Nicholas had been there, but the Germans had this guy that would go door to door. He doesn't come in the middle of the night when you're asleep. Traditionally, the Belsnickel, this idea brought to Pennsylvania, and among the Pennsylvania Dutch culture, how he gives out his gifts is traditionally an actual person would play this part. If we have tons of oral history of this, even up until the 1960s and 70s in Pennsylvania, that there were still people dressing the part as the Belsnickel. He would come to your farm. Now, traditionally, it was someone that was from your neighborhood. And the reason this was powerful was because he would come to your house, and as a little kid, you were told throughout the year, remember, you know how to be good throughout the year because the Belsnickel's always watching. And here this guy would come to your house dressed like this. He'd be angry. He'd be a little mean. He'd threaten to hit you and beat you. And he would know your name because he probably lived down the road or he lived in your valley. Now, as a kid, you're so, worked up and you're not making that connection to, oh, that guy looks like old man Messerschmitt from down the road. You're just enveloped in the idea that the Belsnickel is at your house. But he could come in and say, oh, Johnny, how are you this year? I remember watching you push your sister down in the field the other year, back in July or whatever. And as a kid, you were like, holy crap, the Belsnickel actually knows who I am. He must have these powers. And traditionally, when we look at stories from the 1800s, when the Belsnickel would come, it was customary that the children would either recite a poem for the Belsnickel or sing a song. They would do something for the Belsnickel. And then traditionally he would, even if you'd been good or bad all year, he would swap you up the backside because no matter how good you were, you probably did something bad at one point throughout the year. And then traditionally he would leave a small gift, and we're talking small gifts, walnuts, when times got a little better, an orange maybe, or a little bit of chocolate. I mean, these were things that, most farmers in the 1800s, how difficult difficult was it to get an orange, of course, in Pennsylvania in 1870. So it was a rare gift to get something like that. The Belschnickel would pull that out of his sack, give each kid a small gift, and then go on to the next farmhouse down the road. This tradition is continued among some Pennsylvania Dutch families. I was always raised with the idea of the Belschnickel. However, by the time that I was a child in the 1980s, there was nobody local that was dressing the part anymore and coming door to door, sadly, at least where I lived. In other communities, there were people that still played the part. Nowadays, 2021, this picture on the right is I took, is a good friend of mine, Patrick Dunmoyer, who's the director of the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown University. Every year for the Kutztown Folk Festival, he dresses the part of a traditional Belschnickel, tells the story, plays the part, etc. But I have been raising my two children with this tradition of the Belschnickel. But because there's nobody that lives around us that does the part physically, my kids go to bed and the Belschnickel comes overnight and leaves them a gift on or around the 6th of December, because that's St. Nicholas Day. The Belschnickel didn't necessarily come on December 24th like we know today with our annual or our traditional Christmas gifts in American culture. I had mentioned also, or briefly, I know a lot of you being former agents in agriculture backgrounds, we can't tell the story of American expansion without discussion of the Conestoga wagon. This again was an American, is considered American, but it was developed and invented by the Pennsylvania Dutch in and around Conestoga, which was an area of Lancaster County. This tradition of the Conestoga wagon was actually based off of a wagon that the farmers in the Rhine Valley had been using in the 1600s. It was brought to the New World. They developed a larger wagon that could hold more of a load. And instead of having just a two horse or two ox lead, they would then use these as much as 6 or 8 oxen or horses that would pull the Conestoga wagons. Throughout the 1700s, as the Pennsylvania Dutch were growing the food of colonial America, it was being shipped to Philadelphia, to large cities, with the use of Conestoga wagons. They were richly painted. The Pennsylvania Dutch have a tradition of painting their furniture and their buildings. We'll talk about that more here in a second. The idea of decorating the horses and the oxen with bells was another tradition of the Pennsylvania Dutch. So you would, we hear and we read of eyewitness accounts of you could hear the Conestoga wagons coming before you actually saw them because of the bells that the horses and the oxen were wearing. And this is an image of one from, I think this came from the late 1800s. Of course, Conestoga wagons aren't made anymore, but there are some that still exist. The Berks History Center has an original in their museum, and I think the Pennsylvania Museum, the State Museum of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg has one as well. They were traditionally painted green with red trim. However, you did find some with blue trim because as different families created wagon works, they all had their own color scheme that was then unique to their brand. Another icon of the Pennsylvania Dutch, and this is only found among the non-sectarians. So the Amish and the Mennonite do not decorate their barns. They never did. Of course, part of their culture and their faith is not outward expression. They are part of this world. They're part of this world, but not in it, so to speak. The non-sectarian Pennsylvania Dutch were very proud of their barns. And in the 1800s, we started the tradition of painting hex signs, or what in Pennsylvania Dutch are known as Scheierstanne, literally barn stars. The term hex sign is a newer word that was brought in by the Pennsylvania tourism industry to get people to come to Pennsylvania. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But this is a very typical Pennsylvania Dutch style bank barn. What you can't see on the back is that there would be a bank. The barn would give you access to the second floor. The first floor, of course, there is exposed under what we say in Pennsylvania Dutch is a Vorschuss or a forebay, giving shade to the animals that were there. And as you can see here, some pretty typical geometric style hex signs. Now, some people believe that there's a lot of myths surrounding the hex signs. Do they all have a meaning? Did we paint them on our barns to protect ourselves from witches and witchcraft? It depends. There are people that believe that. Then there are people that say, no, we did it just for decoration, or as we say, just for nice. But these were all motifs that are found throughout our art. Star symbols, hearts, tulips, and I'll show you in Fraktur here in a second. But this is pretty typical of a Pennsylvania Dutch barn with hex signs. You will only find hex signs painted on barns in that corner of Pennsylvania that I showed on that original map. if you travel outside of that area and you stumble upon a hex sign, most likely somebody bought it and put it on their barn. But there are still hex sign painters. Eric Claypool is probably the premier artist right now that you can hire. He will come and put paint stars on your barn for you. In fact, he's doing a barn right now. He showed some pictures of with me yesterday. It's just absolutely beautiful. The work he does is all just beautiful geometric shapes. Here's another example of a hex sign, of hex signs on a Pennsylvania Dutch barn. And as I'd mentioned earlier, we are a decorative people, us non-sectarians. We see the art of the Pennsylvania Dutch in our furniture. On the right is a hope chest or a dowry chest or a blanket chest, can be called a lot of different things. This one dates to the late 1700s. It was typical of the Pennsylvania Dutch non-sectarians to decorate their chests like this. And on the left is what's known as a piece of fraktur, which is some of our traditional art. You will see these types of art here on the left. A lot of times you'll see them in the form of a baptismal certificate, a wedding certificate, or a house blessing. And then sometimes these would, of course, be displayed in the home in the sense of a house blessing. A lot of times they were not actually displayed, but hidden in the rafters of the house to actually bring it as a blessing for the house. So another thing we need to clarify is I've been flipping between Pennsylvania Dutch and German, and some of you, of course, are familiar with the term. Well, when I hear the word Dutch, I think of the Netherlands. I think of the country of the Netherlands, which is where the windmills and the wooden shoes and all that stuff. But you just told us, Doug, that these were German people. So what's the deal? Why is it? What is it? Is it Pennsylvania Dutch? Is it Pennsylvania German? It's both. What we need to remember is that languages are living entities, and words in languages change meanings throughout time. We know that. If we could travel back in time to 1600s era Pennsylvania and the English that was being spoken at that time period, there was no sense of German or Germany because it didn't exist yet. I had mentioned earlier, Germany as a country doesn't really come into existence until 1870. In 1600s era English, the word Dutch did exist. And that word meant, at that time period, meant any person coming from Germanic-speaking Europe. So we, being people from the Rhineland, speaking a form of German, of Deutsch, were called Dutch by the English settlers. Now, they were the people of government. They were the people of power. So that term stuck. Now, as Germany eventually, fast forward a couple hundred years, by the 1870s, we see this creation of a German people, of a Germany, all these things. And academics in the late 1870s would be the first groups to say, well, honestly, you guys come from Germany, so we're going to start calling you Pennsylvania German. That term became popular among academics, but it never became popular among us as a people, because for 200 years of our story, we had been called the Pennsylvania Dutch. We referred to ourselves as the Pennsylvania Dutch, and it was rooted in our DNA at that point. So today, in 2021 America, both terms are acceptable to use to define who we are. But if you bump into a Pennsylvania Dutch person on the street and you ask them, like if you would have asked my grandparents, are you Pennsylvania German or are you Pennsylvania Dutch? They would not have thought twice about it. They would have knee-jerk reaction. We're Pennsylvania Dutch. We're the Dutch. We speak Pennsylvania Dutch. So that's why we have this conflict of names and this myth that's out there that, well, actually, blah, 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 blah. Just know that both terms exist. And the reason that we're called the Dutch is because of what Dutch used to mean 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago in the English language. Our language, the Pennsylvania Dutch, which in Pennsylvania Dutch is known as Deutsch, there's the word there in italics, is a unique language in the sense that it still exists. In the story of America, most immigrant languages only survive one generation. And what I mean by that, if you think of Italian Americans or Irish Americans or any Greek Americans, that first immigrant generation comes, they are still speaking the language of wherever they came from, Greek, Italian, etc. And usually that language will be passed on to the first generation born here in the United States. But after that, language dies out for almost all immigrant groups that we look at. whether it's the Italians or the Greeks, because of the idea of assimilation into America, this push, we got to be American, we speak English, et cetera, et cetera. So most immigrant languages only last one generation. Pennsylvania Dutch, on the other hand, is one of the only immigrant languages, if not the only European-based immigrant language that has not only survived one generation, but is still alive today, meaning that it has survived for how many years? Since 1683. That is a unique fact about our language, and it's something that I take a lot of pride in, that we're stubborn people. And language defines a group. And for whatever reason, all of my great-great-grandparents decided this is something that defines us. This is something that we're going to maintain, all while still identifying as American as well. Just because we spoke this language did not mean we weren't American, of course. When I look at my grandparents' generation, my grandfather on my mother's side, my maternal grandfather, when he went to school, he didn't speak any English. Went to school, learned English, was bilingual, Pennsylvania Dutch and English, proudly served the United States Navy in World War II in the Pacific. My paternal grandmother, her brother, only spoke Pennsylvania Dutch, learned English in school, eventually would go on to get drafted and serve and be killed in action in Europe during World War II. We saw Pennsylvania Dutch regiments that fought in every American conflict, whether it was the Revolution, the Civil War, the War of 1812, the Spanish-American War, World War I. So just because we spoke this language, we still identified as Americans. And that's something that we need to remember. I think all too often, we're pushed this idea that, well, this is America, we all speak English. That's not our history. And the Pennsylvania Dutch are a great example of that. We've been able to maintain this language, and not only maintain it, but also it has developed and changed over the years, because it is, languages are alive. As one example of that is, as new technology was invented, things like a radio, movies, airplanes, we of course didn't have a word for those things. Back in Germany, where German was still being spoken, somebody created new Germanic words for these. And that's today. There is a German word for television. There's a German word for radio. There's a German word for airplane. But here in the United States, we didn't have anybody that was like overseeing the language. So a lot of times we would adopt the English word. We would start using the word TV, or we'd start using the word radio. So we would be speaking of Pennsylvania Dutch, but we would see this influence of English words coming in because we didn't have the ability to just, for someone to create a word. Now, there were some people that did that. Like, for example, we do have a word for airplane in Pennsylvania Dutch. It's Luftschiff, which literally means airship, right? But, if you'd ask the average Pennsylvania Dutch farmer today, some 70, 80-year-old guy, hey, how would you say airplane in Pennsylvania Dutch? He'd most likely turn to you and say, well, airplane. Or what do you call a TV? A TV. I mean, so we do see this influence of the English language, of course, on our language as well, but we've been able to maintain, 75% of our language is still the traditional language that was spoken by our ancestors in the 1700s. It's kind of fun that if you ever get the chance to travel to the area of Germany where we came from, and I've been there many, many times, when I speak Pennsylvania Dutch in that region of Germany, they will understand me, but they'll often say, you're talking like my grandparents did. You're using these words that we don't use anymore, because they're words that were words in the 1700s. But in Germany, the language developed and changed and new words were created, where here we're like a time capsule, essentially, of a language and of a culture too. There are cultural things that we do that we've been able to preserve that back in Germany, as the years progressed, died out, traditions that died out, food items that died out, that we maintained because we were cut off and we were able to maintain those things. We truly were a language and a cultural island in that southeastern corner of Pennsylvania. We weren't, it wasn't very popular to marry outside of the Pennsylvania Dutch. You married a Pennsylvania Dutch girl, you married a Pennsylvania Dutch boy. There were exceptions, of course, as time went on, but throughout the 17 and 1800s, for sure, it was expected of you to marry within the culture and the language. As we get into the 1900s, things change. People move off the farms. We have the industrialization of America. People move into cities and come into contact with Scotch Irish, to come into contact with Italian Americans, to come into contact with Latinos and Latinas. So, that has changed. But for the mass majority of our history, we were a people of a people within this country that were able to kind of be an island of ourselves, but also be part of the bigger picture. What hurt our language the most, of course, would be in the 20th century. When we think about World War I breaking out, the United States had a common enemy now in Germany, and speaking a German-sounding language was not very safe and was not. It was frowned upon, and in a lot of cases, that would be that generation, the 19 teens and on. You would start to see this pressure from parents and grandparents, and especially from the public education system, of putting down the language. Look, this is the United States now. You will not speak English. You will not speak Pennsylvania Dutch in schools, for example. You know, that first couple generations, my paternal grandfather, who I'd mentioned earlier, fought in the Navy in World War II. At his one-room schoolhouse, he often told these stories that, you know, these were all farm kids growing up on the farm. They only spoke Pennsylvania Dutch with their family. And, you know, this was an 8th grade education. They came to school not being able to really speak much English, or if they did speak English, it wasn't very good. And it was the job of that one-room schoolhouse teacher to teach them English, to read, write, etc. in English. And the rule was that if you were caught speaking Pennsylvania Dutch on the playground, in the school, I mean, you got hit. My grandfather's nose got broken by his teacher because he was speaking Pennsylvania Dutch out in the playground at recess time. Those stories are not uncommon, that boys and girls would get hit with rulers across their wrists, would get physically beaten by some teachers who really took it as their mission to beat the language out of us. Somehow, some Pennsylvania Dutch, thick, stubborn as we were able to survive that. World War II came along. That was another. Of course, we had a common enemy in Germany again. That also put a lot of pressure on us as a people and as a language, as to how it would survive, or would it survive. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we were able to survive those 2 world wars and everything that happens post-World War II as we become a global society, a nation that's part of a global society. And this culture and this language is still there, which is really an interesting aspect to us as a people and as a group. Oops, I went ahead at one too many. Give me 1 second. So now we're in the 21st century, and the story now is, well, we don't know what the story is going to, how it's going to unfold. But when we look into the 21st century, what I'm finding with the work that I'm doing is that the children of the 60s and 70s and 80s who grew up with grandparents that still spoke the language, but their parents didn't pass it on to them, are feeling a disconnection. They know that they're Pennsylvania Dutch. They were always told, well, you're Pennsylvania Dutch. But for a lot of people, they don't know what that means. And this idea of what sociolinguists call FOMO, fear of missing out, is strong. They have these fond memories of visiting their grandparents' farm, good food, these traditions, this weird language, and they know that that's part of them, but it was never passed on to them. And now a lot of people are trying to make that connection. Grandma and grandpa have passed on, mom and dad have passed on, and a lot of people feel like I lost this link to who I am, to my culture, to my history. And that's why the work of people like myself and groups like the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center in Kutztown, or the Schwenkfelders, that are trying to preserve the language, are helping people make that connection to their past. Well, why did your grandmother do X? So they would say, like, every year at New Year's, we always ate pork and sauerkraut. Why did we do that? What's the story there? Well, we were able to tell them there is a reason for all of that. And I'll share that story real quick, because maybe some of you grew up eating pork and sauerkraut on New Year's and you just knew, well, that's what you did. But there's a reason for everything that we do. Why pork and sauerkraut is the traditional New Year's meal is because we chose the pig as our meat of choice for New Year's, because how does a pig eat? A pig rooches its snout forward when it eats. Poultry, we look at a chicken scratches backwards. So from that aspect alone, you want to go into the new year. You do not want to go backwards. So we chose pork, plus pork was one of, easily accessible. Sauerkraut had always had this idea of, it was green. Originally it was green cabbage. Green symbolizes money and luck. Also, sauerkraut was just something that was always on hand. When you think about January, pre-refrigeration days, what did you have on the farm? Well, you had your fermented cabbage, your sauerkraut down in the cold cellar that was always there, easy to eat. Plus, sauerkraut has a lot of natural healing and healing abilities. It's high in nitrogen. It has can remove toxins from the body in the middle of the winter. So it was also seen as a it was a healthy meal to have at New Year's. But that's the reason why we eat pork and sauerkraut at New Year's and not roast turkey or ham, something like that. As I mentioned earlier, there is this revival among young Pennsylvania. When I mean young, I mean anybody under 70 years old to make this reconnection and try to grab hold of their cultural identity. And there are a lot of people working to preserve and maintain our story, whether it's our language, our traditions, our foodways. And the internet has been an absolute godsend in that sense, because it has allowed us a platform to not only tell our story, but to get our story out beyond that geographical region of what was traditionally Pennsylvania Dutch country. So we have things like Facebook groups. There are multiple Facebook groups on Facebook that deal just with Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. There's a group here, I just highlight this one, Pennsylvania Dutch and Proud. The last time I had checked this, when I took this screenshot, there's over 10,000 members on that page. And it's a place where a lot of people will share recipes, memories, stories. It's also an opportunity for a platform to educate through Facebook. And like I said, there's multiple groups like that. We have websites out there. For example, this is a little self-bragging here, but this is my website, PA Dutch 101, where you can go to learn more about the language and culture aspects. Before the internet, how would I have been able to get this stuff out there? Think about that. Now I have people contacting me who grew up in Berks County or Lancaster County or Lebanon or wherever. And then because of jobs or school, now they live in California and they are totally cut off from Pennsylvania Dutch culture. But because of the internet, they're able to connect and reconnect with people. We have presses like Masthof Press based in Morgantown, Pennsylvania, that their sole mission is just to produce publications dealing with Pennsylvania Dutch and Pennsylvania German topics. They're a great family-run business. They sell Pennsylvania Dutch dictionaries, calendars, children's books, which I'll give a shout out to this. There are children's books being written bilingually in Pennsylvania Dutch and English. Here's just two examples. Penny Olive is the story of a young little Pennsylvania Dutch girl who's learning about her culture. You read the book one way, it's all in English. You flip it over, it's the exact same story, but in Pennsylvania Dutch. There's also a boys version, Davy Applebutter, which has this little boy, Davy, who goes to visit his grandparents' Pennsylvania Dutch farm, and the reader learns about traditional Pennsylvania Dutch farming practices and how important agriculture is and was to the Pennsylvania Dutch story. We have artists out there that are taking our old motifs like we saw on that chest and in our hex signs and on our fraktur and reimagining them and making them, modern day. One such artist, a good friend of mine, Rachel Yoder, she lives in Boyertown, Pennsylvania. She takes these traditional motifs and reimagines them, but keeps the original DNA is there. The DNA Pennsylvania Dutch folk art is there, but brings it to the 21st century. Beautiful work that she does, preserving our art and our history. YouTube is something that I'm very active in. I'll give a shout out to myself. So I have a YouTube channel. I think that's where Paul maybe found me. I don't know. That is constantly putting videos out there. It is the era of videos. I mean, most people's attention spans are less than a couple seconds these days. I'm a high school teacher. I know that firsthand. If I have 17 and 18-year-olds that I can get their attention for more than a minute, I've won the day. And for a lot of people, we are an audio and visual learner. So things like YouTube have been wonderful to be able to put these quick, short informational videos out there, teaching the language, teaching the culture, teaching the history. And there is a desire out there. As of right now, I have 8,600 subscribers to this YouTube channel that does nothing but Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. So there is this FOMO idea, this fear of missing out, or this wanting to connect or reconnect is true. I mean, it's definitely out there. We have an online dictionary now where you have access to the internet. You can just, hey, how do I say cow in Pennsylvania Dutch? Type the word cow in English, hit search, and it'll give you the Pennsylvania Dutch word die koe, which is the Pennsylvania Dutch word for cow. So there's all these things that, before the internet, we never would have had these rich opportunities to do the work that we're doing. I do have to give a personal shout out to, in my mind, the place that's doing some of the best work at telling our story, and I've referenced them a couple times throughout this presentation, the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center. They are found on the campus of Kutztown University, which is in Kutztown, Berks County, Pennsylvania. If you ever find yourself in that region of Pennsylvania, I highly recommend you take a stop. It is an outdoor living museum. They have a 18th century stone Pennsylvania Dutch farmhouse. exactly like it would have been in the late 1700s, early 1800s. They have a traditional Pennsylvania Dutch bank barn that you can tour that has hex signs painted on it. They have a one-room schoolhouse that dates to the 1800s that is exactly like it would have been in the 1880s. They also do live demonstrations throughout the year, traditional farming practices, traditional cooking scenarios. They do an Easter on the farm every spring where they bring in artisans to teach you this history and sell crafts and so forth. They do a Christmas on the farm every year, and they do a harvest festival in September called Heimetfest, which this year it's September 25th, if you want to put that on your calendars. They have a great active website. Check them out. They do a lot of really, really good stuff. They're also on all the social media things, and they post a lot of great educational, informational stuff out there for anyone that wants to learn more about the Pennsylvania Dutch. And of course, they are very active in the Kutztown Folk Festival, which I didn't reference yet, but that is the largest and oldest folk festival in the United States. It was canceled the last 2 years because of COVID. We'll be back in 2022, and I think that'll be the 73rd annual or 72nd annual Kutztown Folk Festival. It brings in over 100,000 people every year. It runs for the first week in July. Well worth the trip if you're interested in learning more firsthand about the Pennsylvania Dutch. A large, massive festival that has food, music, art, culture, educational opportunities, hands-on, everything, every aspect of Pennsylvania Dutch culture. Just a couple things here, and then I'll open the floor for any questions. What I really love seeing is that now we see a lot more businesses also, seeing an opportunity here. Saucony Creek Brewery is not a competitor to Yuengling because this is a small microbrewery in Kutztown. But for example, there are other microbrews in Pennsylvania that are taking Pennsylvania Dutch words and using them in their business. Saucony Creek has a beer called Hexerei, which is the Pennsylvania Dutch word for witchcraft. And I know that 1787 Brewery in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, they have a beer called Donnerwetter, which is the Pennsylvania Dutch word for thunderstorm. It's also a common swear word in Pennsylvania Dutch, even though that doesn't make sense to an English speaker, but to a Pennsylvania Dutchman, we can use that as a swear word. One of their beers is called Donnerwetter. And you're seeing some businesses, especially in Pennsylvania Dutch country, that are starting to not be afraid to use the language more. For a long time, from the World Wars on, no business would have been caught using these types of, using Pennsylvania Dutch in their advertisements or in their products, but that's changed and it's continually changing. So I guess I would leave you with this idea, what is the future? Of course, in Pennsylvania, die Zukunft, we don't know. Was kommt? What will happen? We do know a couple things for sure. The sectarian groups, the Amish and the Mennonite, they will continue to grow. The fact that is always interesting to say is that the Amish in America double in population every 20 years. We know the Amish have a lot of kids, and Pennsylvania Dutch is still the language of the Amish in the house. So the language will never die out as long as there are Amish. Among the non-Amish and the non-Mennonites, the non-sectarians like my people, me, conservative estimate, you're not going to have any speakers of the language within the next 50 years. Some people are saying 2 generations. I think even that's a little... thinking positively. The average Pennsylvania Dutch speaker these days, I'm an exception to this, but really are the people that are in their 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. My grandparents' generation was really the last native speaking population. However, there are people that have learned the language that do use it. I'm raising my children bilingually. My wife agreed to it, and we've had a lot of fun with it. I have a young daughter and a young son. My daughter will be 9 here next week, and my son is 6. He'll be 7 in November. They can fluently understand Pennsylvania Dutch because that's all I speak with them at home. And then of course, English is everywhere else. And they speak English as their first language, but that was a decision that I made being a 12th generation Pennsylvania Dutch speaker here in America. I felt I had to pass this on to my children. So they are the 13th generation in our family line that have this language here in the United States. And I do know some other younger Pennsylvania Dutch speakers that are trying to teach their kids as well. One thing that we would love to have happen would be like immersion schools or daycares that would be able to provide some Pennsylvania Dutch language instruction, even if it's just little stuff here and there would make a difference. But that takes money and the right people, et cetera, et cetera. The things that I know will survive as well, as I mentioned, the Amish, is our food is not going anywhere. That will be around forever. Pork and sauerkraut on New Year's, shoe-fly pie, whoopie pies. We think of Lebanon bologna. all these traditionally Pennsylvania Dutch foods, dandelion with hot bacon dressing, dried corn, Pennsylvania Dutch potato filling. And for any of you that are Pennsylvania Dutch or live in southeastern Pennsylvania, those are all food terms that you probably recognize, and maybe now you're hungry. And those of you that are not from that region of Pennsylvania, I guarantee that if you tasted any one of the things that I just listed, you would enjoy them. I don't think our food's going anywhere. Some of our traditions are not going anywhere. I think Groundhog Day is going to be continued to be celebrated. The idea of the Belschnickel, who knows, maybe they'll hold on. And our language, I already talked about, the future, we don't, it's not necessarily a bright future for those that aren't Amish and Mennonite. But again, the foundation has been laid. It's been here for 300 some years. In that sense, it's there, and I don't, it's not going to be erased from our history. But the ability to walk down the street in a town and strike up a conversation with somebody in Pennsylvania Dutch, those days are gone, sadly. Probably never to return, except at places where you're going to have other speakers maybe gathering, like at the folk festival, for example, or something like that. I've spoke a lot, but I would love to throw the floor open for any questions. I'll keep an eye on the chat bar. And if you would like to learn more information, of course, check out my website. I have the address down there below, padutch101.com. I answer any email that I get, and I'll be glad to help you out or answer any questions that you might have. I do a monthly live stream show on YouTube called PA Dutch Live, where I bring in a guest every month, and that's always done all in English, so anybody can understand, what's going on. And it's always educational, informative, and fun. We try to make it as fun as possible as well. So our next edition will be July coming up. Wait, let me check my calendar. July 21st. That'll be our next episode on my YouTube channel. So feel free to check out my YouTube channel as well, where you can learn a lot of information about all things Pennsylvania Dutch and check out some of my videos. And like I said, don't be afraid to email too after the presentation if you'd like to, ask any questions or anything like that. But I'll gladly throw the floor open. I'll hang around a little bit for as long as you want me until you throw me out of here.
Any questions?
We have
Doug?
Doug's website addresses there in the very beginning of the chat box. So if you'd like to copy those down, we have them there for you.
And I just put the website in the chat bar as well, padutch101.com.
Great.
I usually get at least one question. Come on, guys, don't be shy. Sei net schüchtern, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch.
Do you ever incorporate the Pennsylvania Dutch language in with your high school students?
I absolutely do. And I do a lot of culture, for sure. We always do a unit on the Pennsylvania Dutch. We always do a project with the Belschnickel. My kids write a letter to the Belschnickel every year, kind of like they'd write a letter to Santa Claus. And we talk about other cultural traditions too. We talk a lot about, historically, why these German peoples came to America, and we talk about the history of the region where they came from and why people might have wanted to leave. With my upper level German kids, like my 4 and 5 groups, my seniors, by that time their German's pretty good. That's when we really get a chance to talk a little bit about dialects and be able to say, well, what words can you hear in Pennsylvania Dutch that you understand, and which ones are words that you've never heard before, or are words that don't make sense to you. So I work them in as much as I can. I see some questions here. Landis, that's a very popular Pennsylvania Dutch name. Of course, David Heiser. Okay. Are there any ancestry search places for PA Dutch heritage? Neil, yes, there's a group called the Palatinates in America, I want to say. Let me look real quick while I'm thinking about that. There's a group on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, called Pennsylvania Dutch Genealogy or something like that. Palatinates to America. Here, I'm going to put the link in the search bar, or in the chat bar. Check their website out for anyone who's interested. But like I said, there are multiple groups on Facebook that ask a lot of questions about genealogy and Pennsylvania Dutch genealogy, I guess I should say. And there's tons of people saying, hey, for example, I'm a descendant of John Landis from 1802. Anybody here know anything about him? And you'd be surprised how often people will chime in and be like, oh yeah, here's and here's all this information about this guy that lived 200 years ago. It's really interesting. We've been lucky, the Pennsylvania Dutch, because of things like our art, like our baptismal certificates, and the Pennsylvania Dutch churches were notorious record keepers of baptisms, of weddings, of births, that a lot of our original church records from the 1700s and 1800s still exist. Not all immigrant groups have that luxury, but we do. Now, I'm not saying, not everybody's going to be able to make their whole family tree, but we have a rich treasure trove of documentation that has survived, where people can do the genealogy research and can take it back usually pretty far. We have a lot of the ship records too of immigrants coming to the port of Philadelphia, and what ship they were on, where they had come from, what their profession was, all that stuff that you can search and find. A lot of them have been digitized too. So. Okay. Anything else, guys? If you think of some later down the road, like I said, just shoot me an email. I'll gladly respond.
Thank you, Doug. I grew up in Lehigh County. I'm not a Pennsylvania Dutch heritage, but we learned Pennsylvania Dutch songs. We had Pennsylvania drinking games. I Do Shaney was one that comes out, and those are infamous. I have a Boompa, which we didn't talk about, but
I did not. No,
these are all things part of the culture that I was exposed to growing up, and I would definitely encourage you to check out that Pennsylvania Dutch 101 and Doug's. It is, if you enjoyed what he was saying and you want to get some chuckles on some other things that he does, it's worth the time to do that. And Doug, I greatly appreciate it, and thank you.
I appreciate the invitation. Anytime I get an opportunity to tell our story, I take advantage of that. So I appreciate the invitation and being able to talk to all you guys today. So thank you.
Thank you again. Okay, it's after 5. We still have a 15-minute. Well, I'll turn it over to Gene. Gene, what do you want to do about the video? Do you want to? Is there anybody interested in a? Gene, tell us about the video.
Well, I was going to say that we could finish our tour today in South Philadelphia at Pat King's of Steaks restaurant, and Scott has a video from us, or for us, from Frank Olivier, who is the great nephew of Pat Olivier, the founder of the original Philadelphia cheesesteak sandwich. When I first contacted Frank about doing a program for us, he told me he was going to be in Italy this week on an international food tour. So he prepared this short video for us. So Scott, if you can roll that for us.
Bear with me just 1 second. I thought it was going to be an easy thing, and I realized I have 27 screens open in the background, and it's not showing all of them. So hold on just a second.
Sure.
Hello, welcome to Philadelphia, everybody. My name is Frank Olivieri Jr. I am the president owner of Pat's Steaks in South Philadelphia, where the Philadelphia cheesesteak and steak sandwich were invented back in 1930 by my great uncle Pat. The story goes that my uncle Pat, my great uncle Pat, and my grandfather Harry.
You guys seeing it okay?
Beginning of the Italian market, which is the oldest.
Yes, but it's not very loud.
Market in the country still to this day.
Can see it, Scott, it's not very loud.
So one day they got tired of eating hot dogs, so my Uncle Pat sent my grandfather down to the butcher to see if they had any extra meat that he could use for his sandwich that he usually made for himself. So
that's at 100%.
Harry comes back
Good.
Puts the meat on the grill, cooks it
Here
up.
now.
Time onions and puts it on an Italian roll because they're Italian and that's what they were having at the time, Italian rolls. And a cab driver who ate hot dogs every day saw the sandwich and said, "That looks really great. You should make one for me." So Pat said, "Well, I only have enough money to make one for myself, but I'll be more than happy to share it with you." So I broke the sandwich, gave it to the cab driver. Cab driver took a bite and said, "Wow, this is amazing. This is the sandwich you should be making for me." And that was the invention of the Philadelphia steak sandwich. And right at the beginning of the market, people used to shop fresh every day. No one had refrigeration in their houses at the time. Most people in South Philadelphia didn't even have to go to plumbing. So people shop fresh every day. I was up there every day making sandwiches. So winter was fastly approaching, and the person who owned the building where we are now said to Pat, "Why don't you come inside the building and make your sandwiches on the second floor of the restaurant?" The person just left. And I don't have any money to pay rent. Joe Butch said, "Well, when you start making money, then you can start paying this rent." Pat was up on the second floor making sandwiches for the patrons in the bar below, and more people came into the restaurant, the bar, excuse me, to eat, and they did the drink. So the bartender got infuriated, cut a hole in the brick wall, and told everybody, "Drinking you can stay inside, but eating you have to go outside." And that's how we started serving sandwiches outside. So eventually Pat's business took over the bar, it was in the front of the building, and the produce stand, which was in the back. And they just incorporated the building as it was. And it is the same building that we are in today. Nothing's changed much over the years, except for the addition of a couple items, one of which is cheese, of course. Legend has it that one of our employees got tired of eating steak sandwiches with them without onions, got an equivalent cheese from the Italian market, put it in the sandwich. And the customer saw it and said, "That's really great, let's try that for ourselves." And so Papa Joe, or Joe Lorenzo, made the sandwich for their customer. The customer said, "This is really great, you should try doing this one." So that was the invention of the cheesesteak. How we became so famous for cheese whiz was that we had other stores, or my family had other stores coming at the same time. But Uncle Pat wanted to keep the store as original as possible. So he kind of like frowned upon having cheese at the original location, whereas the other stores had cheese. And so in 1956, my dad found the Kraft cheese, trying to get it on the side of the grill. His uncle could not see it. And he would put it on steak sandwiches for customers. And the customers kind of liked it, and they thought it was pretty good. But cheese whiz was a rage in the 50s. Kraft cheese was to be found actually in a scene in the movie of Some Like It Hot, where they're on the train and everybody's moving to the back of the car, like Jack Lemmon and Jack Lemmon and whoever was in that movie. So one of the girls grabbed a jar of cheese whiz, so it's visibly there in like 1956 and Some Like It Hot. So additions over the years, by customer demand, were sweet peppers and mushrooms. None of which I think personally add much flavor to the sandwich. I think as it stands alone, the meat, the bread, the cheese, and the onions, it's a perfect match. We only use ribeye for our store. That's what Pat used in the very beginning. A lot of cheesesteak places throughout Philadelphia and the country, however, use different cuts of meat which are not ribeye. It's a cheaper cut of meat. Slice it really thin. They chop it up, and you hear that chopping sound. We don't do that plain chopping sound. Anybody does that in our store, they're immediately dismissed because you don't want to really mistreat a good piece of ribeye that way. So our ribeye is sliced thin enough where it basically just falls apart. No chopping necessary. We are a 24-hour-a-day business, 7 days a week. We only close 2 days a year, and we still hold true to the original mission statement, which is, you know, it's, Uncle Pat always said, if I won't eat it, I won't feed it to my family, there's no way I will serve it. So all the ingredients here are the freshest as possible. The bake is baked. Our bread is baked. I wouldn't say most people say our bread is exclusively for us. All Philadelphians use similar bread from like 3 different bakers. So we all use a very similar bread, which is like a French style Italian, which is kind of soft inside. And baked several times a day for us. it's amazing. I mean, this business has been here sometimes since 30 or 90 years old. At any given time, celebrities walk up. Could be a president, could be a vice president, could be a movie star, could be a rock singer, or it could be just an electrician with lunch break, or a wedding party at 2 o'clock in the morning for a snack. Nothing surprises me here. I've seen it all. Just happy to be here. I'm fourth generation. So I'm going to tell you a little stories, some stories which made the business so famous. Uncle Pat was a true showman. And what he would do was he would take his sandwiches to theaters and take pictures with movie stars and have them blown up bigger than life so that people would come down to see what Pat was hanging out. I think I have some right over here. Pictures of it? I'm going to find this picture from somewhere. Our office is very cluttered. Right now we do national shipping through goldbelly.com. And I'm going to try to find those pictures. But in the meantime, so he would take pictures with movie stars and then take them back to the store and have them blown up bigger than life. And people would come down to the store and see what Pat was hanging out. One of my favorite pictures is this one. Kind of difficult to see. I'll hold it up to the camera. So Humphrey Bogart, I'm sure most of us are old enough to know who Humphrey Bogart is. So in this particular picture, Pat says, "Hey, Bogey, I'm going to take a great picture." So Bogey says, "Sure." So you can see, usually Bogey was always filmed with a drink in one hand and a cigarette in another. So Pat said, "No, I want to take a really good picture." So Pat takes out his .38 caliber revolver and hands it to Bogey. It was actually loaded at the time. So Bogey puts down his drink and said, "Pat, now I take a picture of you sticking me up." And there is the picture of Bogey and Pat. So he'd take pictures like this, take them down to the store near and far to see what Pat was doing, who was hanging out there. And those other pictures are still not available. There's two of the three stooges, Larry Fine, who was a Philadelphia guy, and Curly was in that particular picture. We have pictures with Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, and the rest of the New York Yankees, where they were doing an exhibition game, probably somewhere maybe Korea. Pretty cool picture. So Uncle Pat was always trying to figure out ways how to do business. And during the Depression, as he started, there was an inexhaustible supply of meat. People could not understand where Pat was getting his meat. So at the time to make ends meet, my grandfather worked in the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and he actually drove a forklift truck. And then my Uncle Pat, at nighttime, worked at the Radio Flyer sled company to make extra money. So a vicious rumor started in Philadelphia. Pat was selling horse meat at the store because no one could understand where he was getting his meat. Everybody had coupons of gas, sugar, milk, etc. But Pat had all this meat. It was a crazy amount of it. So someone started a rumor that Pat was selling horse meat at the store. So Pat was infuriated by it. So he basically wanted to prove everybody wrong. So he put $10,000 in a mason jar, stuck it up on the counter behind him. When he was there at work, he babysat it, he took it away when he wasn't there. And he would offer this $10,000 cash reward to anybody who could prove that Pat was selling horse meat. And people came from near and far across the country to get $10,000. Because back then, 10 grams was like 110,000. But no one could ever prove that Pat was selling horse meat because Pat stuck in the room. He figured if people came in and tasted a sandwich, it was like no other sandwich out there, that they would be whole. And they were. And that's how the business got so famous. So the business has continued on. Pat and his brothers and my dad opened up several stores in the Philadelphia area. And they did well, but none did as well as the original store. So in the pictures have just arrived. The picture of Uncle Pat in the center, Pat, Larry. Great picture. One of my favorites. Here's a picture with Connie Mack. Connie Mack was a real good friend of Pat. Out of all the things I wish I had that ball. A signed autograph ball by Connie Mack. And this is Uncle Pat play when he was down in Florida. In Florida. Here's Uncle Pat. Mayor's office is at. Graziano. You should see this picture, really, right? I'm facing. There's one with Joe Lewis. Here's that picture. The Yankees, the roof coming back, the guard. That's pretty cool. So, the business as it is today, still running, still owned and operated by the same original family. Famous movies that we've been involved in, Rocky in 1976, which basically put Philadelphia on the map as an international city, although it was at one time, but for films. We've been in other movies such as Fallen with Denzel Washington, In Your Shoes. We've been featured in a couple of M. Night Shyamalan movies, which is kind of awesome. And we're still doing our thing today. So we're gonna come back and show you how to make a cheesesteak. That'll be the next part of this video. But thank you for listening. And like I said, welcome to Philadelphia. And listen, although Pat's is the original, we're the inventor, we're the pioneer, we're the originator of the cheesesteak, there are other cheesesteaks in Philadelphia. Try them all while you're here. But you have to come down and try the original too. See you soon.
You want to watch the other one?
Sure, you might as well. Go ahead.
All right, bear with me. Hold on, I'm getting there.
All right, I'm gonna I let Scott try to do that, and while there's a moment of silence here, I'll just again thank you, thank everyone for participating, and especially to Madeline and her team, Tom, Jean, for all the efforts that you put in here.
The story about how Pat's Potato Steaks started, and all the stories about behind Pat's Potato Steaks. I'm going to show you how. All right, now that you're.
We hear it, but we don't see it.
Hey, bear with me.
So again, I'll just, if you have any ideas and suggestions, this is a whole different way of doing things for this guy, but I really like some of the speakers at Gene. I thought they all did a great job, and I enjoyed the afternoon. But
Just a little flavor of Southeast Pennsylvania. We hope you all enjoyed the virtual tours.
Yeah, and also in the chat box, Jean McAvoy had posted the tentative schedule for next year in West Palm Beach. So check that out. Looks like they have some fun stuff planned for next summer.
All right, now that you heard the story about how Pat's Potato Steaks started, and all the stories about behind Pat's Potato Steaks, I'm going to show you how to make a cheesesteak.
That's your cheesesteak special right there from the one and only Pat's in Philadelphia. So again, this is going to conclude everything, and sure do appreciate everybody there. Scott, couldn't have done it without you. Appreciate all your help, and maybe we'll see you at the wine and cheese party. Otherwise, thank you very much, and we'll see you somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks to all. Thanks to
Great
all.
job today, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Great programs.
Thanks, everyone.